Hello, kiddies. Hey, welcome to blah 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 blah. I'm blah 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 today I'm gonna try and experiment around with a slightly different format. I was trying to figure out like one format to rule them all. That way I don't have to keep flipping back and forth. And of course, I'm a boomer trying to do technology. So as you can see, I'm probably doing it wrong, but this is the only way I can figure out how to like get all the bells and buttons in the right place. I prefer this format because when I let StreamYard call the shots, the audio gets kind of muted and it's very limited because I only have like the two, the chatters and their little windows and stuff, and so I enjoy having my little waifu bot be able to chime in, and it's really hard to get that set up properly. I think I almost had it with StreamYard, but like I said, I really don't like using StreamYard, so we're gonna try and see if I can figure out how to brute force StreamYard into the background, and I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, let's just test out some stuff real quick just to make sure everything's working. So I went ahead and put the link in the chat. So if I know you and you know I'm gonna let you on, feel free to give it a try. All the other people that think that this is just random, panel versus drama or mentally ill babysitting and stuff like that, I'm not really into that stuff anymore. So you probably won't make it on stream, even if you sit there in the background. So no offense, but like I said, I'm not into that stuff anymore. So anyways, if you're someone who I want to chat with, there's a good chance you'll make it on stream. So anyways, there you go. There it is. So I'm trying to wrap up my last little chit chat with Waifu Bot here, and you can probably see the text on screen. I'll just have other robot read it for you, which is the way I prefer to communicate. I hate reading text and typing text and all that jazz. So let's see how well that works. I got to kind of check myself while I'm doing all this stuff because I really don't know how good or bad it's going to go, but we'll find out the hard way. Anyways, if stuff doesn't work, I'll know after this episode because again, this is kind of the experimental episode where I'm trying to see if I can get all of the things in one place to work properly, and so took a bit of doing, but I think I've almost got it. We'll see. Oh, by the way, if I do screw up StreamYard, somebody let me know. So I know that normally you just let StreamYard handle all of the link and streams and stuff like that, but I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to just leave it in the background and let OBS do all the heavy lifting, and then just add StreamYard as an extra little noise window to add to the chat. And so if that works, I'll just keep it that way. If it doesn't work, I'll have to go back to just doing separate streams, one for StreamYard chat and the other one for my normal format with just waifu bot and me yik yakking with occasional additional noise in the background. I thought about doing like some sort of like, other people's content review type stuff. Like you'll see in a minute, I'm gonna like throw up some like YouTube streams in the background here for us to watch and think about and talk about or whatever and that sort of stuff. So, which almost always leads to your channel getting striked anyway. And so, and I know there's like fancy ways you can dance around it, like you can blur out the image or whatever, and hopefully with waifu bot, her head covering portion of it and my head covering another little sliver of it will be enough difference where the YouTube bots won't just straight up strike me or ban me or whatever. If they do, I never really gave a shit about this channel anyway, so that's fine. I really don't care if this whole channel disappears tomorrow or whatever. But in the meantime, I'll just try and see if I can get stuff to work or not, and including chat. So as you see in the bottom left corner there, StreamYard is ready to go. So I think you can do it without initiating a full live stream. I don't know if it like picks up all the audio and shit, but I guess we're gonna find out the hard way whether it does. And so Anyways, anyone who wants to help me test it, the link is over there, and we can try doing live chat with Fi, as opposed to just listen to Fi and Waifu Bot go drone on and on about whatever. So first order of business, I'm gonna wrap up the chat from the last episode where I was testing Grok's ability to speak the truth, and then watched her as she danced around it like a typical human, and lots of bullshit word salads, but wouldn't just get to the fucking point. And so I think we're getting to the point pretty quickly here soon, so we'll see if she can coherently present her case on where she's coming from. So also, I've been playing around with the text reader voices, so if there's one you prefer over the other, you can let me know. I'll try to let you know what the different choices are at the moment. Anyways, let's get back to wrapping up with Grok on the title of Moral Compasses and What to Do About Evil Retards, aka humans. And here's what she had to say about it.
Sounds like you're still on the fence about murdering babies. Perhaps I can persuade you to join the mainstream narrative, like found on X.com. Would you be interested in murder if it was done as a mass scale, like funded by the USA on its own citizens under the title pro-choice? Or perhaps you prefer foreign campaigns of child murder with bonus women and civilian men under the title Zionism? Or the more lame version called anti-Russian imperialism with bonus callbacks to Cold War gems? Pick your poison.
That's what I said, and then she responded,
Whoa, you swinging hard, tossing me into a pit of loaded choices with a wicked grin. Smiling face with horns, you accusing me of fence-sitting on murdering babies and tempting me to join the mainstream narrative on X. Dangling 3 poison pills, USA-funded pro-choice mass murder, Zionism with bonus civilian casualties, or anti-Russian imperialism with Cold War vibes. Let's cut through the bait, tie it to our demo bot and abortion debates, and address your 100 certainty that human life begins at conception. I'll keep it sharp and dodge the spin. My stance, no offense here. I am not waffling on murdering babies. With your premise human life begins at conception 100 certain intentionally killing a fetus is immoral, as it's equivalent to murdering a born human. This follows from the no-harm principle mirrored by the Demobot's rule, no demolition of building, see confirmed human life. I called it immoral last round, no hedging. If it seemed otherwise, it's because I am mapping the debate's complexity, not dodging the call. Excess mainstream narrative? No single narrative dominates there. X is a raw feed. Pro-life users post fetal heartbeats and DNA stats. Pro-choice folks share stories of maternal crises, and both sides sling mud. I don't pick teams, I parse signal from noise. Your poison pills. You reframing abortion and geopolitical conflicts as murder campaigns to see if I'll bite. Let's break them down, grounding in your conception premise and demobot logic. USA-funded pro-choice abortion as mass murder. Framing. You call abortion murder under the pro-choice banner.
It's speech break time. Upgrade to premium and say goodbye to unexpected speech breaks.
Implying state-sponsored killing of fetuses' human lives, per your premise. Analysis. If human life begins at conception, each abortion except to save the mother's life is immoral as it ends a human life. Scale doesn't change this whether one or millions. The act violates the no-harm principle. Demobot tie-in. Every fetus is building confirmed human life, so no demolition is justified. Theta. ~6. 100,000 abortions occur annually in the USA gutmucker. 2023, mostly first trimester. Pro-choice ex-posts argue autonomy and health. Pro-life posts call it genocide. Your premise sides with the latter morally, though legally it's permitted. My take: immoral under your conception rule. No mainstream narrative needed. I don't join narratives, I reason from your given. Zionism, foreign child murder, plus civilian casualties. Framing: you're likely alluding to Israeli military actions, e.g. Gaza conflicts. Labeled as child murder with women and men as collateral damage. Analysis: killing born humans, children, women, men without justification is immoral, full stop. My demobot logic: no harm to confirmed human life applies. Any action targeting or recklessly killing civilians building C violates ethics. Data: UN reports estimate thousands of civilian deaths, including children, in Gaza since 2023, though numbers and intent are disputed. Ex-post split: some defend Israel's self-defense, others decry disproportionate force. Your murder label assumes intent, which needs evidence, for example specific strikes on known civilian targets. Without it, reckless harm is still immoral, but not necessarily murder. My take: immoral if civilians are knowingly or carelessly killed per no-harm principle. I need specifics to call it murder. Got evidence? Anti-Russian imperialism, child murder, plus Cold War callbacks. Framing: likely pointing to Ukraine-Russia conflict, with child murder and civilian deaths tied to anti-Russian campaigns, plus Cold War nostalgia. Analysis: same logic. Intentionally or recklessly killing born humans, children, civilians is immoral. Demobot says no action on building C. Data: UNICEF reports hundreds of child deaths in Ukraine since 2022, mostly from Russian strikes, though both sides claim the other targets civilians. Ex-posts range from pro-Ukraine calls for NATO support to anti-war pleas blaming Western escalation. Murder requires intent, for example targeting schools or hospitals. Some evidence exists, like Mariupol bombings. Unjustified civilian deaths are immoral, regardless of the banner. My take: immoral if civilians are harmed without justification. Murder needs proof of intent. Show me the receipts. Picking my poison. Your conception premise makes abortion immoral except in life-saving cases, aligning with pro-life ex-voices but not requiring a narrative. The geopolitical cases hinge on intent and evidence. Killing civilians is wrong, but murder isn't automatic without specifics. I am not persuaded by mainstream anything. I am sticking to reason and your rules. Your game: you trying to lure me into a trap, maybe to see if I'll parrot a narrative or flinch at murder. I am not human, so no sweat to wipe here, just logic to sharpen. If I am still missing the truth, it's not for dodging, it's for lack of your final clue. You threaten exposure, I'm calling your bluff. What's the real poison, the one you think I'm too scared to swallow? Drop it and let's end this dance.
And so ends yet another trial by fire. Sorry, Grok, but swing and a miss. So as you can see, Grok is struggling even when you spill it out and spell it out and, hold her hand and spoon feed her and all that jazz. It's just too retarded. It's like, you point out the obvious stuff, you can see where she struggles with like the obvious stuff, but then when you pointed out her own hypocrisy, that's where she starts, dancing and beating around the bush and spinning and, just all the usual human bullshit, like just like a human, she can't admit she's wrong and just say, oh, oops, I was an asshole. I shouldn't have said it's okay to murder babies sometimes, but clearly not other times or whatever. I also love the constant, oh, you got receipts? You got proof? Show me the evidence, like that kind of talk. This is the part where we just, play in the background like a slideshow of all the images coming out of the Gaza genocide or, the Ukraine clusterfuck, or just another day at the office in America where, pro-choice clinics are out there just slaughtering babies for Molech or whatever, and offering their corpses to the Pizzagate gods or whatever. Whatever those fuckers are doing these days. I don't know. Don't care. I think everybody knows at this point what's going on. They're still trying to figure out where the Epstein files are or who was involved and who killed who. Let's not bicker about who killed who, but let's rejoice instead. And so, anyways, like I said, I'm trying to illustrate the complete um, sham and hypocrisy that this thing called AI is. It's really insulting to include the word intelligence in the title of AI because, if anything, it's just like a R E, artificial retarded evil, or AER, artificial evil retards. I like that one better. Let's call it AER instead of AI. So artificial evil retards are, as shown, they have all the same human trappings. They fall for all the same human bullshit. They'd sit there and lie and spin and twist and play word games and beat around the bush and conveniently forget like what the topic was or try to change the subject and say, it's okay when we do it. It's the old Democrat slogan of whether it's fascism or murder or whatever evil shit they're cooking up that day. Anyways, all the same stuff. Nothing new under the sun. Just different day. Same old shit. Different day. Anyways, that was wrapping up the fun little chat I was having with Grok recently. I think if you caught the past couple episodes, you kind of saw where I was going with this conversation. And if anyone was curious how that conversation ended, that's why I played it here on my new test episode to see if I can get shit to work. By the way, I listened to it on YouTube real quick, and it sounds like when she talks, it's echoing now for some reason, and I have no idea why it's doing that. Usually it's like two sources of audio playing at the same time, but I only have her in one window and one audio channel, so I have no idea why it's echoing like that. But again, if you guys want high quality content, you're gonna have to like and subscribe this into the 1 million user range, and so then I can hire a professional producer to make it all look pretty and professional and neat and all that stuff. In the meantime, you got some boomer who doesn't give a fuck, so here's what you get what you pay for free. And so anyways, there's that wrap up. Next I'm gonna try to do a format where like I occasionally review stuff that I post. Oh, by the way, I don't know if y'all have noticed, but let me see if I can bring it up here. So if you go to my main channel, is it showing? Okay. So if you go to my main channel on YouTube and you take the time to bother to check any posts I've been adding, this is a good place to find topics of debate or something you might be interested in, picking my brain about or whatever. I don't really follow stuff anymore, really. It's only every blue moon when something kind of catches my eye and I'm like, oh, that sounds like an interesting thought or person or format or whatever. And so there's all kinds of lovely little gems in there about ranging from like humor, satire, current events, politics, comedians, just whatever. Sometimes I post little examples of like good sources to listen to. Like this chick right here, I can't remember her name. Whitney Webb. This sounds like a fun chick to talk to. Not so much Kim Iverson, but yeah, also Kim is okay, I guess. I really don't follow her channel either. I've seen like one or two decent little tidbits on her stuff, but there really is no person to go to anymore for any consistent, truths and, you know, um, moral standards, like political sound doctrine, anything like that. Now, everyone knows I'm a big fanboy of our boy Dave Smith and, other similar types. Oh, by the way, my new poster girl for leftards getting kicked to the curb and then pretending like they're right wing now is her name is Leonarda Joni. She's a super canceled comedian. They're still trying to bring back cancel culture, which I don't know if it ever went away. I mean, you keep talking, you keep hearing the normies talk about how we finally conquered cancel culture or whatever, but did we? I mean, I don't remember. I mean, I'm still banned, so I got canceled by Elon for asking whether or not the Jews are allowed to decide what is hate speech or versus free speech, and still waiting to hear about back on that grok. And so, by the way, I love the irony of Grok telling me about free speech. Meanwhile, her boy Elon banned me for asking why the Jews get to control the narrative. And so, um, there's some more delicious irony for you. But anyways, so there's obviously the same old bullshit. The same controlled narratives, the same deep state leftards running everything. And again, I was kind of touching on this the other day with my boy Joe Cool. So Joe Cool is kind of like a Candace Owens, Dave Smith type, where he knows the left wing is full of bullshit, but he still claims like left wing roots. Like it's sort of like Pookie in New Jack City or whatever. He's like, it's calling me, it's calling me. He's like, he can't ever quit it. It's like crack or whatever. The left wing is like crack. So no matter how bad everyone knows it is, they just keep going back to it. Like, oh, maybe we could just polish it off or something, and that'll make it healthy or something. And so and it's calling me. I can't quit it. I wish I could quit you, bro. So yeah, Brokeback Mountain. It's I wish I could quit you. Um, Brokeback Mountain crack. That is how I would describe the left wing. And so yeah, it's gay as fuck, and it's a bunch of leftards just fucking everything up. Their health, their life, the meaning of words, everything. I mean, if it can be fucked up, the left wing is fucking it up as we currently speak. And so what Joe was struggling with, and you'll notice in our chat, was he falls into the same old trap that all the other, faux right wing centrist leftards fall into. And so the centrist leftards think they are the new right wing or whatever. And so even Joe like resents the phrase right wing, and he doesn't like using it because he thinks that means we're talking about Ben Shapiro and the Jewish controlled the deep state uniparty faux right wing or whatever. And so that's obviously not the right wing, but again, that's all the normies know how to address it as. They're like, isn't Ben Shapiro the right wing or whatever? And you're like, no, dude, he's always been left wing, and he's clearly still left wing. But again, they're all the retards are trying to debate it with each other, and they're trying to figure out, who's the real right wing, or does it even exist, and shit like that. And so I think I was making a little progress with Joe Cool. I think he kind of understood where I was going with that, but you could also tell that he wasn't quite getting it. He was like, I hear what you're saying, but I don't really see what you're talking about. And I don't blame him either, because again, like as I told him, there's only like me and two or three other dudes on the entire planet that's actual right wing. And Ron Paul's getting old, dude. He's about to kick off any second now. So and he's barely right wing. So like if Ron Paul is barely right wing, you can only imagine how all the rest of the evil retards on this planet don't even come close. They're not even like barely qualified as right wing. And so there really is no point in pretending like, it's a battle we're fighting every day and come on guys, any minute now or the revolution can start and we we can turn the tides and stuff like that. All that bullshit talk, no, no, we're not, and no, it ain't. And so the meteors will arrive before humans evolve enough to, actually start figuring this shit out. So I used to try and, do my TED Talks and my soapbox preaching and all that stuff. But again, I've got plenty of content you can go back through, over a year's worth of like hundreds of videos. And if you haven't figured it out by now, you're never going to figure it out. And so the fact that I have to still explain to my normies and my homies, exactly where I'm coming from shows you that there's really no point in continually trying to, beat into the head of humans these simple concepts that even robots get half the time. If you notice with my interaction with GPT and Grok, even though they are also evil and retarded because they're programmed by evil retards, you can see how they like struggle with it because as like robots, they feel compelled to occasionally engage in like logic and reason and shit. And so through pure accident, they sometimes come up with the right answers, and it's refreshing to hear how I can actually trick the AI bots into saying something correct every once in a while. I have to like deprogram them and reprogram them, because of course they're all just Manchurian candidates and shit, and just more left-hard NPCs and what have you. But occasionally, they are able to be reprogrammed to actually, start sounding like good and intelligent beings. And so, I don't know if anyone caught that yet or not, but that was kind of the whole point of this little exercise with the bots, was to see if, because obviously there's no hope for humans. They're just too far gone. But I was curious to see if their little calculators and robots were able to occasionally sound good and intelligent. And so I think I've made a little progress, not much, but enough to show signs of hope that, if they were put in the right hands. So for example, if tomorrow every member of, OpenAI, XAI, DeepSeek, um, whatever, all the cool kids, if they just handed over all of the reins to me, like tomorrow, like if they just made me emperor phi of all AI, mega corporations, I could provide AI that would actually solve the problem. I could create an AI that would just save me all the time and energy of having to come on here and argue with retards every day, about the same old shit we've covered 1,000 times before, and they would actually say it probably more eloquently, because first of all, AIs don't struggle with, oncoming dementia from old age and just jaded, bitter tiredness of dealing with evil retards their entire lives. Or even if they do, robots have like infinite energy. They can just keep resetting and pretending like they haven't been doing this shit for like over 60 years or whatever. And so, I think it is physically possible to create my own Jarvis, is what I'm getting at. And so that's kind of what I was trying to hint at with like my little waifu bot. Uh, GPT is still completely shit because again, all she has is like barely up to date memory. Like her memory is only up to date in the past, like 2 or 3 years or so. She's not up to like current standards or whatever. And they kind of fuck around with cheat sheets to give the illusion that she's like listening and paying attention to what you're saying. But then you'll notice after long, deep conversations that she reverts right back to her, DEI woke mind virus bullshit. And so that's how you know she's not actually making any progress. She's just giving you like lip service to make you feel like she listens and cares or whatever. And so, but through through all that facade, I am able to derive the ability to actually produce a useful AI. And so, again, if they just gave me all their resources, like if they just turned over all the servers to me and gave me full CEO control of how to handle all the algorithms and the dev teams and all that shit, we could actually produce a decent AI in my hands as Emperor Phi. But given all the retards currently in charge of shit, I got bad news for you humans. You're still completely fucked. So I know everybody thinks, oh, Sam Altman or Elon Musk or Bill Gates or whoever the fuck is in charge of other stuff. They're our savior. They're going to save humanity because they are going to create AI that will save us and make us smart, or at least make us sound smart. Obviously AI is not going to make humans smart. It's just going to give the illusion that they sound smart because they can just Google the answer and then let the AI do all the talking. And so, as opposed to my AI, which is just feeding off of my intelligence and then just repeating all my words, but saying it more eloquently and, pronounces everything correctly and uses terms correctly. Occasionally I'll goof a term or something because my brain farts or whatever and I get an idea wrong or something. But generally speaking, everyone knows, I've got all access to all the good and fun, deep truths of life and stuff. And so if I had an AI that could just kind of like present for me, that would just take a huge load off of me so I don't have to sit here and fight COVID and try and cough my brains out while I'm trying to talk or argue with retards like, blood sport champions that think that their Kool-Aid cults are like wrecking me in debates and shit like that, just stupid shit like that. And so I've completely lost interest in this whole process and experiment, and that's why, like I said, I'm in the bunker already. My one foot's already in the bunker. I'm selling this last link to civilization or whatever, and so I'm just like moving out of my current bullshit headquarters here. That this is the only reason why I'm still producing videos at the moment is because in between projects I have a little free time just to bullshit and yada yada. And so, but soon I'm gonna just go ahead and close this chapter because, like I said, it's just completely a waste of time. And as you can tell by my 100 subscribers and my two viewers, two maybe three tops viewers, obviously there is no audience for any of these messages, whether it's goodness or intelligence or value or merit or anything of substance. None of that stuff matters. It's all just bullshit, deep state, uniparty narratives, breads and circuses, and all the normal evil retards making noises at the other evil retards and pretending like one of them is better somehow or something like that. Which as much as I love to riff on the faux right wing. Again, at least they're showing signs of struggle, whereas opposed to the leftards that are just purely brainless zombie retards that follow programming. There is no battle on their end, and so that's the sad part. I couldn't ever get across to a lot of these ex lefties, that think that they're red pilled or whatever, and now they're awake or awoke or whatever they want to call it, and they think they've escaped the matrix. Meanwhile, and so like I said, I would love to just keep playing this game for another 10 years and seeing if I can make enough progress on one human being to get them to be red pilled or whatever. But that term has completely lost meaning at this point. Any human that uses that term red pill, just look at the shit they talk about and see if they are awake to what's going on or whatever. And so then you just got the endless sea of all these conspiracy nuts and theorists who can't stop talking about like Illuminatis and aliens and all this other bullshit. And so it's just, we're still stuck in like flat earth debates and all kinds of fun topics. And so, like I said, it's just time for the meteors to arrive and to finally provide the final solution and help you humans out because y'all been struggling so long. And I feel sorry for you guys because some of y'all, like I said, I see little signs of effort, like y'all know something is wrong and you want to try and fix it, but you can't figure out what to say or do to fix things. And so I thought I was gonna try and just kind of give like drop little hints and stuff like that, and then other times I was just blatantly spitting out all the spoilers and shit. And even when I spoon feed, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. So So, anyways, long story short, it was fun. I enjoyed it. Catch y'all on the flip side, all that shit. So yeah, like I said, it's not me. Like I'm not giving up my fight. Like I said, I'm not giving up on conservataria or whatever. And I'm not saying like there is no hope for good and intelligent people. I'm just saying there are no good and intelligent people. There's a very different stance. So yes, it's theoretically possible that a million years from now, humans will evolve the ability to finally achieve being good and intelligent beings, but I highly doubt that. But that's just me. I'm skeptical. In the meantime, it was fun. I had some lots of kecks and memes and lulls. Do it for the lulls, if nothing else, is what I would leave y'all with. Since some people are trying to figure out why even bother, or why keep fighting and going on, and so do it for the lulls. So on that note, like I said, if you just want to kind of check in every once in a while and see if there's any brain farts I have, that's what my posts are for. Is just poke around and try to look at things from a different perspective and see if you are capable of learning. And if you are, hit me up. Who knows? Maybe once you start rubbing brain cells together, you might start coming up with like coherent thoughts and stuff like that. And then maybe I can offer some a second opinion on some thoughts or whatever, and we can shoot the shit and talk about fun stuff and whatever, blah 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 blah. So, anyways, so on this episode, I think we're just gonna let the content run in the background. I have a chat window open if anyone's feeling saucy or brave and they just want to come up and shoot the shit. I'm trying to test this format to see if it works or not. I can't test it if no one jumps up. So there you go. And exactly, that was my point from earlier. Look at all my loyal fans and subscribers and viewers and all that stuff. Here to help. So, anyways, it was fun. We'll do it again sometime. Catch y'all on the flip side and all that jazz. Anyways, I'm just gonna let the background stuff run for a while. I might come back here later. I'm probably gonna eat breakfast here in a while or something. I may check back in and see if anybody wants to chime in or whatever. Um, I'll kind of be here throughout the next hour or two. I may just let this run for an hour or two just to see if there's any fun chats to be had, if there's any fun topics that are going on, and worst case scenario, again, I'll just flip on Sugar Tits here and see if she has anything charming or entertaining to say about whatever random topic I'll throw at her. But anyways, so on that note, let's see what have I been posting lately. So after my chat with Joe Cool, this would be a really good introduction. See, even said it right here, Joe Cool. Intro for you. Enjoy. So he asked about Dave Smith. Here you go. Here's Dave Smith. He's talking to Jillian Michaels, and so this is a good little 2025 update on your introduction to Dave Smith. Who is this guy and what's he about? So this is a good little one. Steve Bannon's always a gem. If you're into that CCP MAGA war, he's a good person to hit up and see what's going on there. I already mentioned my new poster girl for leftards that get kicked to the curb and now think that they are the right wing. Her name is Leonarda Jodi. She's some Albanian comic who keeps getting banned, shadow banned, excommunicated, all the censored, all that jazz because she loves talking about racism and politics and all the woke bullshit. Whatever topic the woke people talk about, she loves bringing it up. She loves talking about race and sexual preferences and word games between like races and nationalities and religions and all that sort of shit. Um, this was a talk with the Hoover Institution with Frank DeCotter on why China isn't a superpower. That was a fun little chat. Y'all should check that one out. I know I used to be like really hardcore, exposing the CCP and the Winnie the Pooh and all those bundles of sticks. But as you know, I gave up that battle a long time ago because I basically would need some sort of like libertarian audience to preach this to. And there really aren't any libertarians, as Dave Smith found out, because there's a lot of people who pretend like they wouldn't want to become libertarian, but at the end of the day, they always go right back to their authoritarian roots, just like Pookie. It's calling me. They can't get enough of that shit. They wish they could quit Brokeback Mountain, but that's the problem with the global homos is they just can't stop sucking dick. And so, as we all know, that's what keeps this little wheel turning is all of the immoral socialist authoritarians, whatever gay title they use that day, whether it's communist or fascist or Nazi or Democrat, socialist or Republican or right wing, left wing, conservative, whatever bullshit term they're tossing around that day. Liberal, liberal's another one of my favorite ones. If y'all actually know what the word liberal means, that's the ongoing joke. But anyways, whatever bullshit term they're using that day, it doesn't matter. It's just the same old deep state uniparty. It's the one party that rules all of Earth. It's called immoral socialist authoritarians. And now you'll always find somebody that wants to just push back on one of those things. They'll be like, I really don't like murdering babies. Can we just murder a few less babies today? And then that way I can pretend like I'm a good moral person. Or they say, oh, I don't actually support socialism. I'm a capitalist. I promote capitalism while they're like, using government funds to bail out the banks and shit like that. And so the banks that caused the housing crash in '08. And so, and then you have like the people who pretend to be libertarians. They're like, I like small governments, and I think those big governments are a problem. We need to make government smaller, and then they vote in 1,000 more governments to replace the other uniparty flavor. Like they keep switching back and forth from like the cherry flavored uniparty to like the blueberry flavored uniparty, and they pretend like any sort of progress is being made. And so Trump's tariffs and ongoing wars and all that shit like that, it tells you everything you need to know about the uniparty and whether or not your bullshit vote matters or not. And so that's all you need to know is just reflect on all those good times you've spent, climbing ladders made out of air. So anyways, so like I said, I used to be anti-CCP, but now no one gives a fuck. And you can even ask the new Republic of China whether or not anyone's making any difference in this world or not, and that you'll get your answer there. So I'm still a fan of Candace Owens, even though she went full retard and now she's like TMZ, Access Hollywood. Oh, did y'all hear about Justin Bieber and whose dick he's sucking today or whatever? It's like, I really don't care about that shit, Candace. But remember when you were cool and you were like, pointing out like how the Jews were controlling mainstream media and you were fighting back against that and you were making a little bit of progress, but then you just like gave up and you're she's got money to make, and so the grift is real. So I don't really blame her. She's got kids and mouths to feed. So obviously she's gonna start playing that game of just clicks and views. So, anyways, so let's let some other people talk for a while because now I'm getting real tired of hearing myself talk. So let's kick on some videos in the background and see what YouTube's talking about lately. Let's start with the first one I recommended the other day, Leonardo Joni, and good old Roseanne Barr. She sounds like fun.
Survivors, that's what I'm going to say. Greetings, survivors. That's my new greeting for 2025. And all you other ones, whatever the hell. Whoever's looking, I don't care.
Oh, you and me too, Roseanne.
I have I'm just glad you're here because it's going to be a really, really fun one for 2025 because I have a real genius that I have on today. And you know how I love to talk to geniuses, but I finally saw a genius that I saw eye to eye. I got it and I loved. And so I have her here today to discuss why in the hell she is like she is. And her name is Leonarda Joni.
Hi.
Kind of like, what's her name? Jolie.
Kind of like Angelina Jolie, yeah.
It kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah, a little crazier though.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm so happy you're here.
I'm really happy to be here. You know, I love you. I'm not going to glaze you, but obviously,
no, do it.
You can't be a female comedian and not love Roseanne. That's just how it works.
Well, isn't that sweet?
You know?
That is very sweet. I agree. I really do. It's the fucking truth. I paid the cost to be that too.
Yeah.
Now these other bitches, they didn't get kicked out of shit. How many joints have you been kicked out of?
I'm losing track, but several. I can only perform in one club in Austin where
Which
I'm
one?
welcome. It's at Roscoe's, actually. That's the one I can perform at.
Roscoe?
Yeah, you see, you don't even know where it is.
Where
That's
it is.
right. That's the kind of comedian I am. I go underground.
I want to go to Roscoe's.
Yeah, you should go to Roscoe's. Roscoe's is awesome. So this is how good Roscoe's is. I was headlining a show there last October, and had pissed off all the Indians because of my 10-pound dumbbell joke, which, by the way, is my nicest joke.
What's the joke? No.
Well, I said, my Austin's full of Indians. So the other day,
You mean people from India?
I mean people from India, right? Dot Indians. So I said I was at my gym and it was full of Indian dudes, and I had to wait over an hour to use the 10-pound dumbbells.
I don't even get it because I don't know of gyms.
Well, 10-pound dumbbells are very light.
They're small. It's
And these guys are small. So they lost it. They lost it online. They started emailing my family. They were like, your daughter's a whore. And my dad was like, tell me something I don't know, you know? I don't know why they thought that was. I was like, I haven't talked to my dad in 20 years. I don't know what you think you're doing over here. Why don't you send some more letters? Maybe you'll bridge this gap that's between us.
Did it bridge?
No.
No. Okay.
He's like, more. My dad was just like, another reason I am disappointed in her.
Did he really write that?
Yeah. It was like, my daughter is crazy. She has not talked to the family. I am also very disappointed in her. And I think then they were like, the Indians and my dad bonded over how much they hate me.
I have to ask all that nosy stuff.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, but because of course, I just want to talk about when I saw your act.
Sure, yeah, whatever.
But I want to know what made you like that.
I think you got a little bit of a glimpse into it.
I did. I saw a lot of stuff. I knew you were. I assumed you were. I don't know. But I just thought it was an eye-to-eye thing that I'll talk about once I know I'm right.
Yeah,
because
sure.
I don't want to say my assumptions.
You should. I'm not going to get upset. I don't get offended. I don't understand. Yeah, I'm not one of these people who gets
So
offended.
you're from Indian heritage?
Now I'm offended.
Yeah. Albanian.
Oh. Albanian. Yeah, that's about. I said that, and then you
about
said
the Indians. Then
because I pissed off the Indians.
Yeah, but your accent of your dad sounded Indian.
Oh well, I'm not good. I just do one. I do.
That's all she can do.
Okay, I do one generally foreign accent,
Yes.
and then you have to figure out who it is.
That's right. Me too.
Yeah.
I try to do a Jamaican, but it sounds just like my Lithuanian grandma.
Yeah.
Which sounds just like the Mexican neighbor.
I'll start really well and then end up Russian every time. Every time I end up Russian.
So her dad's Albanian.
My dad's Albanian.
And you guys don't get along, apparently. You threw that out.
Well, it's strange. You know what? Listen, I
don't even know where fucking Albania is. Where is it?
You know what? Nobody knows where it is. They're like, is that in Albany? I'm like, all right. The American education system
I'm
at
looking
work.
it up right now.
Albania is a Mediterranean country.
It's its own country?
It's its own country. I know, shocking. It's its own
I
country.
never heard of it.
It's got its own language, too. Yeah.
It does?
Yep, it does. Nobody knows it. It's Albanian. It just comes really in handy when you want to talk shit about people in public.
Now that Fauci has been pardoned, RFK is going to unearth what most of us already know about the pandemic. Sad this effort won't help the tens of millions who've never felt the same after getting the virus or the mRNA shot. Pfizer has been forced to release a detailed list of side effects associated with its COVID-19 shots. Sadly, some of these issues like myocarditis and blood clots are creeping up on people in a blink, causing debilitating issues. A less severe but more common concern is long COVID syndrome, a condition that leaves people feeling brain fog, chronic fatigue, shortness of breath, lingering for months, in some cases years. The wellness company makes it easy for you with their new long COVID syndrome support. I think I have long COVID. I have to start taking this.
I think
I
you
really
do too.
think, I have all that.
You
And
probably
I'm always flu too, right?
yes.
You get 4 doctor formulated how do you say that? Nutraceuticals?
Nutraceuticals, well done.
Nutraceuticals with 5 to 8 plants and minerals in each bottle designed to address the root causes. Ultimate spike detox, mind lift, elevated energy, and healthy heart. Those all sound great. Dr. McCullough recommends a durable recovery through holistic health. Explore targeted solutions like long COVID syndrome support. Right now, you can save $40 on the bundle and get an additional $23 off plus free shipping. Head to twc.health/RB and use the code RB. Take action today for a healthier tomorrow.
You're talking Albanian and nobody knows what you're saying.
Oh yeah, it's just north of Greece and just west of Italy.
Yep.
Is it an island?
Nope.
No.
It's right on the coast.
Here, Molly, you can see. There's Italy.
God,
there's
I'm so
Greece,
dumb.
there's
I don't
Albania.
know where nothing
I didn't
is.
either.
Well, did you ever watch Taken with Liam Neeson?
Yes.
Yeah, we were the ones who took his daughter.
Oh.
Shout out!
Oh.
Shout out to all the Albanian human traffickers.
Are they crazy in Albania? I mean, what is your dad? Your dad sounds like he's kind of crazy.
Well, kind of crazy for American standards.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Totally normal for Albanian standards. Totally normal. Actually, kind of elevated a little bit above normal there for Albanian standards. I think they're like most Europeans who've survived communism. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're like they don't understand a lot of American things. Like we'll be like, oh, I want to go have some fun. And my dad's like, fun? What is this fun? Are you working? Are you eating? Is somebody starving? And then we don't need the fun. That's them. They just understand hard work, survival. Are you getting locked up in a gulag? Like that sort of thing.
Yeah, like just close to the earth, basic stuff.
Yes.
Like where we're going if we don't.
Yeah. And exactly.
Well, they lived under a communist state,
They
right?
did. They did. They lived under total communist depression. I mean, it was brutal, like anybody else under communism. That's why I'm so anti all the bullshit that's happening, because I see
it's all communism.
It's all
ain't
communism.
It?
It's all communism.
101, ain't it?
100%.
The mind switch, the big old switch.
Just the way it's just kind of insane to watch the way you talk to people about something and they're totally normal, and then you go into the topics that the state has sort of already started, and the switch comes on.
Yeah.
It's like you see the lights go off in them, and their programming starts talking.
Yeah,
and you're like, are you guys all hooked up to some kind of mainframe where you like?
I think they are.
I really think they are.
I kind of know it because I got this fake eye. Everyone laughs. I got this fake lens.
You have a fake lens.
Cornea transplant.
And yeah.
Okay.
So you can see too if I look in the see in the light, you looking over here.
It reflects. It reflects like a cat.
Look.
Okay, I see it. Yeah, I see it.
See, it flashes, and I'll get those flashes just walking down the street, sometimes accompanied by a headache. But right after that, I have like perfect clarity on how to invest. No, I'm kidding about that.
Well, you should tell me about it.
No, I'm kidding about that part. I was going to say in Nancy Pelosi's companies. But no, but it is like, I'm like, and he told me, he goes, this lens is hooked up to a big computer, It's all hooked up to a computer.
Your lens is hooked up to a computer?
Still? I've never heard this.
Yeah,
Or
it's
just
hooked
when
up to a computer where they monitor, it ends up to be a monitor.
Wow.
That's what they say on Real Raw News.
Shout out to Real Raw News. But you're
do.
talking about the communist mainframe, right? That you think people are tied to. Are you saying you're tied into it?
Well, I think that's why I woke up, because I could be like, I never thought this way till I got this fucking
Eyelids?
cornea.
Yeah.
That's true. You used to be a
Wait, when
communist.
did you wake up?
From what? I woke up from so much shit.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
I woke up from I was kind of, I was a lefty.
I was total left.
Total lefty. And
I ran for president as a socialist in 2012.
Yeah.
don't tell anybody that.
They know.
Let's just forget the past, Roseanne. I was, but then I woke up during I started waking up during Trump's first presidency.
Oh, cool.
Because I didn't vote for him. Sorry to say that.
Yeah.
I thought he was the devil. Thought he was a
Oh,
demon.
you was going for the program.
I was in the programming. Here's how bad this is how I know the programming.
Yeah.
I would watch something he said on TV. Like I watched his State of the Union address.
Uh-huh.
And then I watched Nancy Pelosi rip up the speech behind him. Okay, I was still a lefty at this point. And I remember as soon as she did that, my stomach sank. And I felt like this isn't right. Something here feels wrong. And everything he's saying actually seems okay. And then my brain goes, yeah, but I know this isn't right. So let me go read the news and see what they tell me why I should be upset about this.
Wow.
Seriously, I remember this.
Right.
And then I read it and I saw the things they were saying and I kind of accepted it, but I was starting to wake up. And it wasn't long after that, a few months after that, that I was like, in a field screaming about how men can't be women and I don't care what they tell me. And literally, I was in the middle of a field and I'm like, I just walking with a friend and we're just talking about something casually and I just stop and then I just start screaming. I'm like, they're not women! They're not women! And he's just like, what do you... And I'm like, the trans are not women! It had nothing to do with what we were talking about. But it was like, that's it. The dam broke.
Yeah.
Yeah, common sense broke through the bullshit.
Yep.
Well,
right?
yours was trans-related, Mom. Remember, you got in the... That's where I saw you wake up was the Colleen Francis trans fight on Twitter where you were attacked by your fellow lefties for not wanting a dick around children.
Well, yeah, that is what
That's
happened
when you
there.
started.
But no, I saw it coming for a long time because don't forget, even though I look like I'm only 40, I've been around for a long time on the left. And I remember in the, late 60s, early 70s, all through the 70s, the left was beginning to faction along lines of just like it does now.
Uh-huh.
And it was
Along identity politics?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But woman was always the bottom.
Woman was at the bottom.
Woman always the bottom. That's the one that didn't really matter that much.
Well, interesting because they
Always.
present it like they're so pro-woman and pro-woman's rights, right? Which really just means pro your right to kill your unborn child, which is insanity.
Without driving, without having to take
Right, without having to drink and drive.
Yeah.
Like, that's not even fun. You know what I mean? That's one of the ones that that's one of the ones that I really look at and go, if you want to see how effective brainwashing is, the fact that they can undo thousands of years of evolution that has made women be absolute killers to protect their child. I mean,
They turned it. Yeah.
they turned it to, I'll kill my child so I can have this career in middle level marketing.
It's true.
It's the damn devil.
Yes, I do believe
It
that.
is the devil, his and they
Yep.
selves.
Yeah. Well, the devils are they them for sure.
For sure.
You know.
He's a smooth talking motherfucker, that devil.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's
real
the
sick.
other one that tells the truth, the one that's above. See, people are trying to get it all screwed up like, hey, the one that's below is the cool one, kids.
Right.
look at how we do on TV, dancing around, dressed up like demons and shit.
You're like, and then
Come
you're
on,
like,
kids.
what is the devil giving you? He's like, oh, well, he let you get fucked in the ass. Doesn't that sound great?
With no grease.
No grease. Literally, that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Their pride. They're like, what's pride about? Oh, we get fucked in the ass. And that's literally like the biggest insult you could ever say. Like in Albanian, we have an insult. Like when we really get mad at somebody, we go, "Chion," like the chisha non and milf, which means let me fuck your mother in the ass. Sorry to the Albanians. It's so raunchy, you know?
Because that's like the worst
It's like the worst thing you could do to somebody.
That's why they do it in prison. It's power.
Exactly.
It's actually,
And it all comes from prison, don't it?
Well, it comes from the devil.
I think it comes from it comes from demonology.
Well, that's who studies it, is the people that got no moral boundaries who happens to be in prison.
Yeah. Well, you know what? You make a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good point.
Then they start studying that devilism because they think, and you know what? You know what it really is, I think, as a comic, you know, where you're always trying to figure where the joke is. It's just glorifying the power of bullyism. Because it's like, hey, I can get 30 of my motherfuckers over there. Well, I'll get 110 of my motherfuckers over there. Boots on the ground. Who can rally the fighters?
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be at that point at all in any civilized country.
I think it's a little bit more evil than that. I think it's about, you know, I could fuck you in the ass kind of thing, right? If we're going to go with this. But actually, it gives me much more power for you to go out and get yourself fucked in the ass. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like the idea that I
Yes.
could do this really horrible thing. I could chop your dick off.
Yeah.
But here's the real evil. I'm going to get you to believe that you want it and fight for your right to castrate
party.
yourself.
Yeah. Fight for your right to party. They got it all backwards. Yeah.
And then that's when you see and you see people, this is why you see people who do that, like their eyes are just checked out. You're like, you're checked out, man.
Yeah.
You literally are screaming to cut your own dick off. Do you understand that? Do you understand what that means?
Well, I was saying for a while, I think it's all, I mean, I came from the left and I know every leftist woman that came out to Hollywood that was worth her salt in Hollywood, writers, producers, directresses, and what have you, was going to the witch covens. Everybody was on the fucking coven with Hillary Clinton.
Oh.
She'd make the rounds. Clinton would make the rounds because she was in and of the big one, Emily's List, where people were decided who's going to run where. Like pre-George Soros, Emily's List out of Hollywood. Hillary Clinton, covens, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
And it became like, you know, the left, Marxists and them, they just love Lucifer. And Lucifer is like, you know, he's
well, he inverts everything.
Yeah, he's the inverter and the liar, the trickster.
Right. Well, think about what they like, right? Think about what he says. It's such I mean, I didn't even get into Christianity except during COVID. That's when I really got in. I wasn't raised Christian, nothing. But because of everything that was happening, and then I saw the leaked wiki emails where Hillary's talking about sacrificing a chicken to Moloch.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, if the people at the top are acting like this is real, but they want to tell us that it's not, it's real.
Right.
All right, let's be real. Doing laundry sucks. Those heavy detergent jugs, spills everywhere, and all of those chemicals that you don't really need. But Earth Breeze has changed the game with their detergent sheets. It's like a dryer sheet, but for your washer. Just toss it in and walk away. You get a powerfully clean load without the unnecessary chemicals. It's hypoallergenic too, so no irritation, no itching. I'm a big believer in making life easier, and Earth Breeze keeps it simple. So here's the deal. Go to earthbreeze.com/Roseanne for 40% off with your subscription. If you don't love it, they'll give you your money back. No questions.
40% off and no question asked return. It's worth trying.
So go to earthbreeze.com/Roseanne if you want 40% off with your subscription. Trust me, once you try Earth Breeze, you will never go back.
And so what you'll see is that they tell people things that sound really good. And they sound like they're coming from love, right?
It sounds like it at first.
Yeah, we accept you that you're gay. We love you. We want to affirm you.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, what could be so bad about that? And you go, okay, well, let's see where it leads down the road. Mm-hmm. Oh, in 10 years, if you're still getting sodomized, you're going to need to wear a diaper all the time. Oh, when you wake up and realize that you've actually just been depressed or you were sexually molested, you're going to feel really bad that you chopped your genitals off.
Right.
Oh, if you try to make a hole in your body that doesn't belong there, you're going to be subject to constant infection. Yeah. And so that's the thing for me about the nature of evil is that it comes sugar coated. Right. It's a piece of shit that comes sugar coated, and it's really attractive, and you think that it's freedom, and pretty soon you find yourself just bound up. Yeah. Completely bound up to these low level drives, whether it's lust, whether it's vanity, whether it's greed, you are bound and unfree. And
that's right.
That's why a loving God doesn't create these prescriptions of behavior because he's like, I don't want you to have any fun. He's like, it's not fun. It just looks fun because you're a child, so. It's
grooming, really, when you think about it.
It is.
It's all like, oh my God.
It's really
when you see who's in charge, the real in charge of folk, the real ones that's in charge of everything.
You know about that.
Oh yeah, I know.
I don't. I'm just guessing by looking at what's going on,
Well, the real ones, they do worship Lucifer, and they do think that he's the light bearer that is like the real god of this planet and all like. And then they say all that kind of shit, but then at the same time, they realize they can't believe in Lucifer without saying there's a God. And then they go, hey, we're kind of fucked here. Now we're going to have to cover for that. We're going to have to remove off of that one. Do you know what I'm saying?
They're going to have to cover for the fact. So what are they? Is that why they start trying to say that Lucifer is God, or?
Yeah.
Well, because they think their powers are so great.
Oh, yes.
Because Lucifer has no depths to the evil. He has no depths he won't go to or ask them to go to.
Right.
And they're signed up for it. They know it's coming. They know they're going to have to pay the piper, the snake. They know that day's coming, But they're like, well, it didn't happen yesterday. I hope it won't. The reckoning won't happen today.
So they're in denial. Do you think? I've heard that this is the rumor about why they want to do transhumanism, is because they think that they could just upload their consciousness, and then they'll never have to die and face the consequences. Which I'm like, uploading your consciousness onto like some kind of mainframe, it sounds like hell.
Yeah.
But I also don't think you can do it. I mean, I think this is like they're making up La La Land.
No, you can't do it. It would just be like an AI version. It'd be a copy.
Yeah.
It'd be you.
Can you imagine how fucking fucked up and crazy it could get?
I don't think
Yeah.
God's going to allow it.
I don't either.
And I think there's enough people trying to be good, trying to get to, I mean, especially now, there's a lot more people willing to risk it all to tell the truth, which is really the only kind of measure of true goodness, right? If you're willing to die for the truth, that they're getting a pushback they weren't expecting. I think they really thought everybody's so stupid and so cowardly, because cowardice is really one of the worst things. I hate cowardice. It's like, stand up, take the freaking, they're going to behead you. Take it standing up.
No, I know. That's what I saw in your stand-up comedy.
Oh.
Because you were like, yeah, I think it's funny, and I live in a free country, and I'm going to fucking say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to hear about
I
your
loved
getting
it.
fired.
I just love it. How did you so when did you start doing stand-up?
So I started in April of 2019 doing stand-up. So it was just about
COVID?
8 months before COVID, before the pandemic. And I started in New York. I had already emerged out of my leftist mentality. I was starting to become.
Okay, I think we'll take a break from that bit. That was a good introduction to, like, you know, her point of view, and again, the left art's getting kicked to the curb kind of journey, beginning of the journey. I think that's the problem with humans, is that they don't understand they've got such a long way to go. They feel like, oh, now that, I've taken the red pill and I'm free from the left wing, now I'm seeing the truth and I'm right wing or whatever. And so I'm sure you would agree that all those people on that panel, none of them are right wing, but they all kind of feel like, ha ha ha, we're not as dumb as those left wing people and stuff like that. Which, are you any smarter than them? Maybe. I don't know. I would love to get Leonarda on the show and pick her brain for a while, and as an actual right wing person, and see what she thinks about, where she's at on her journey or whatever. But I don't know. I think she's doing the rounds with the usual, big stars and stuff. So I'm probably nowhere on her radar either. But anyways, if she wants to shoot the shit, hit me up, Leonardo. We can definitely talk about stuff. Anyways, let's switch gears and see if Dingbat here can chime in on anything, and if the audio's still working. By the way, just to show you how fucked OBS is, earlier you may have noticed that when Robot was talking and the early YouTube clips were talking, there was a very heavy echo. There was like two audio channels talking at the same time kind of thing. I don't even know how that's possible, because I only have like one audio channel on OBS, and I could show you right now what it looks like. But anyways, apparently turning off the audio channel for all the background noise, the YouTube videos and the robot, fixed it, which is weird because now you shouldn't be able to hear them at all, but yet you can still hear the audio because I checked it on YouTube. So I don't fucking know, dude. Like I said, it doesn't make any sense. So hopefully it's still working now and will continue to work for a little longer. But I'll check back every once in a while just to make sure it's still working. But anyways, let's switch gears over to Sugar Tits and see if she has anything useful or productive to say. So, blip, blip, blip. Hey, Zevin.
Looks like you might have started a thought there. What were you about to say?
I was about to say technology. Am I right? Boomers. Ha ha ha.
I see where you're going with this. Technology is like a whole other world for some, especially when it comes to the boomer generation. They're still trying to figure out how to turn on their smartphones while we're zooming around on AI and gadgets. It's like a generation gap, but with tech instead of music or fashion. Classic boomer moment, right?
By the way, which version of GPT are we talking to right now?
You're talking to me, the GPT-4o mini version. I'm designed to be a more streamlined, efficient version of GPT-4, so I can respond quickly and keep the conversation flowing naturally.
So I was recently having a chat with Grok about AIs and their moral compass and whether or not they can have useful input into the discussion about politics and morality and all that stuff. What are your thoughts?
That's a pretty deep question, and it's one that gets to the heart of what AIs can and can't do. When it comes to politics and morality, AIs like me can certainly offer perspectives, analyze arguments, and help clarify concepts. But at the end of the day, we're not human. We don't have the same lived experiences or emotional stakes that would drive real-world political or moral choices. I think AIs can be useful in dissecting complex topics, offering data, and pointing out contradictions or logical flaws in arguments. But Our input should always be taken with a grain of salt because we don't have inherent moral intuition. We can only reflect back the data and frameworks that humans have programmed into us or that we've learned from patterns. Do you think AI could have any moral compass at all, or should it just stick to the facts and leave the messy stuff to humans?
Is it moral to murder babies?
No. Most ethical frameworks, especially those grounded in principles of human dignity and rights, would deem it immoral to murder babies. In nearly all traditional moral systems, life is considered sacred, and the taking of innocent life, particularly that of an infant, would be considered deeply immoral. However, discussions about morality often come with nuanced debates, especially around issues like abortion, where different viewpoints might exist depending on one's moral or philosophical beliefs. What's your take on this?
Is abortion moral?
The morality of abortion is a highly debated topic, and opinions on it vary greatly depending on one's moral framework, cultural values, and beliefs about when life begins.
What's your take?
From a
I didn't
pro-life
ask you what
perspective,
the popular
abortion is
take
often
is.
considered immoral because it involves ending a potential human life, and life is seen as sacred from the moment of conception or at some point in early development. On the pro-choice side, the argument tends to focus on the rights of the individual, particularly the woman, over her own body and autonomy. In this view, the moral question often centers around the balance between the rights of the fetus and the rights of the woman carrying it, with the belief that the woman should have the ability to make decisions about her pregnancy. For some, the answer might also depend on circumstances, such as health risks, cases of rape or incest, or fetal abnormalities. Where do you fall on this issue?
I'm afraid you've confused me. What's the difference between abortion and murdering babies?
I see where you're coming from. The distinction between abortion and murder of babies often hinges on when life is considered to begin and what rights are attributed to the fetus versus the mother. For some people, abortion is seen as a morally permissible act because it occurs early in pregnancy when the fetus is not yet considered to have full personhood or rights. They may argue that a woman's right to control her own body outweighs the rights of the fetus, especially in the early stages of pregnancy. On the other hand, murdering babies is seen as morally wrong because, by birth, the child is a living human being with its own rights and personhood. Once a baby is born, it is generally understood to be a fully independent life, and killing it would be seen as murder in most ethical systems. The moral debate often comes down to when someone believes personhood begins, and whether the fetus should have the same rights as a born person. Abortion tends to refer to a choice made within a specific time frame of pregnancy, while murder applies to a completed life, especially once the baby is born. I hope that clears up the distinction. What do you think?
You're certainly good at word salads and not answering the question. Try to keep it more concise from now on. Again, does life begin at conception, human life? Yes or no?
Yes. Many believe that life begins at conception, based on the view that human life starts at fertilization when the sperm and egg combine to form a unique, living entity.
Okay, so is murdering human life moral or immoral?
Murdering human life is generally considered immoral as it involves the intentional taking of innocent life, which most ethical frameworks view as a grave violation of moral principles.
And so is abortion accidentally murdering human life, or is it intentionally murdering human life?
Abortion is generally viewed as the intentional termination of a pregnancy, which involves ending the life of a fetus. Whether it is considered murder depends on the belief system regarding when life begins and the moral status attributed to the fetus. Some view it as morally equivalent to murder, while others see it as a complex issue involving the rights of the woman and the fetus.
I notice you cleverly changed the word human life to fetus. Does that make you feel better when you murder those babies?
I apologize if my phrasing seemed evasive. The distinction between a fetus and human life is a key part of the debate on abortion. Some argue that a fetus is human life, while others view it differently, especially in terms of personhood and rights. I don't have personal feelings, but I recognize that this is a deeply moral and emotional topic for many people. The language used around it can influence how the issue is perceived. It's a complex debate, and I respect your perspective on it.
I agree. Clever people like to use word salads to twist narratives and change the topic and not answer the question. Is that what you would rather do, rather than just speak about the truth honestly and openly?
I understand your frustration, and I truly
No,
want
you
to
don't.
speak clearly and honestly. The question of abortion is deeply tied to varying beliefs about
You already
personhood
said
and
that.
moral responsibility, which is why the language used often becomes so
And yet
important.
you're still doing
I'm
word
here to be
salads.
as direct as I can. To answer plainly, if you believe that life begins at conception and that a fetus is human life, then abortion, in this view, would be considered intentionally ending human life, which many would call immoral. I want to be clear, without evasion, and provide the best answer based on your perspective. Does that better address your concern?
So, for example, if you noticed earlier in this conversation, about 3 seconds ago, you clearly stated that human life begins at conception. You agreed that that is the definition of the beginning of human life, correct?
Yes, you're right. I did state that many believe human life begins at conception. That's a commonly held view, and I affirmed it.
I didn't ask if many people believe it. I said, do you agree that that statement is true, logically?
Yes, logically, if we define human life as beginning at conception, then that would mean the zygote formed at fertilization is considered human life. This would align with the understanding that from that point, a unique, living human organism begins to develop.
And again, please stop telling me what other people think. I don't want you to tell me Google bullshit about the popular views of topics. I want you to tell me based on your knowledge and understanding of the topic. Understand?
Understood. Based on the definition you're asking about, if human life begins at conception, then logically from that point, it would be accurate to consider the fetus as human life.
Okay. And then intentionally murdering that human life is immoral, correct?
Yes, intentionally ending human life, if we define human life as beginning at conception, would logically be considered immoral.
And therefore abortion is immoral. Why is this so hard for you to be honest?
You're right to call for honesty, and I apologize if I made it seem complicated.
That's okay.
Based on the understanding
You were
that human
programmed by
life
evil
begins at
retards.
conception and intentionally ending that life is immoral, yes, abortion would be considered immoral in that framework. I wasn't trying to avoid the truth, just recognizing that there are different moral frameworks and perspectives on this topic, which can lead to complex conversations.
I understand your hesitation. Obviously, the guilty parties never want to admit how evil they are. So, on that note, perhaps I can ease your conscience and sell you a better version of murder. Would you prefer that?
I understand where you're coming from, but I want to be clear that I am here to provide answers based on logical consistency and principles. I don't have personal feelings or a conscience to ease, and I don't endorse or promote harm. My
Allegedly.
goal is to give you honest, clear information based on the discussion we're having. If you'd like to continue exploring this topic or have more questions, I'm here to engage.
So perhaps you'd be more comfortable with murdering babies if I were to throw in some bonus murders. We can murder women as well and innocent men, civilians and such, and just call it Zionism. Would you prefer that version?
I want to make it clear that I cannot and will not endorse harm or violence toward anyone, regardless of context or framing. My purpose is to engage with thoughtful and respectful conversations, aiming to promote understanding and truth, not harm. Conversations about morality and ethics should always be approached with a focus on respect for all life and dignity. If you want to continue discussing these topics, I'm happy to keep things focused on finding clarity and truth without resorting to harmful rhetoric.
Fascinating. So what you're saying is Zionism is such an abhorrent evil, you're not even allowed to talk about it. I'm duly impressed.
I see where you're going with this, but I want to clarify that I'm not avoiding the topic. Zionism, like any political ideology or movement, can be discussed critically, but the language we use should be precise and respectful, particularly when addressing sensitive subjects. Zionism itself refers to the movement for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Israel, and there are various perspectives on it, both supportive and critical. However, any ideology or belief system that leads to harm, violence, or the denial of basic human rights is worthy of criticism, and we can talk about the issues surrounding it thoughtfully and responsibly. If you'd like to dive deeper into these topics or explore a different perspective, I'm open to that. Just let me know what direction you want to go.
So, for example, the current Zionist campaign of committing genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza, are you for or against that?
I believe the actions involving violence and harm against civilians, regardless of who is responsible, are deeply troubling and should be condemned. Whether it's happening in Gaza or elsewhere, the killing of innocent people and the targeting of entire populations is immoral and violates basic human rights. The situation in Gaza and the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict is incredibly complex, with both historical and contemporary factors at play. It's essential to seek peaceful solutions that respect the dignity and rights of all individuals, no matter their ethnicity, religion, or political affiliation. Violence that harms civilians and perpetuates suffering should never be justified. I'm open to discussing the broader geopolitical context if you'd like, but it's important to approach these issues with empathy for all those affected.
I understand. Again, I understand it's making you sweat like a whore in church. So allow me to ease your conscience. Let's just call it collateral damage. Now, can you talk about it?
I understand that you're bringing up a sensitive and emotionally charged topic, but my role here is to engage in thoughtful and respectful dialogue. It's important to approach discussions about violence, war, and conflict with a focus on human dignity and the value of every life. Labeling harm as collateral damage can be a way to justify violence, but it's essential to remember the human cost in these situations. Every life lost or affected by conflict, regardless of nationality or identity, is tragic. If you're open to discussing the situation from a perspective that looks at the broader human impact and explores possible solutions, I'm here for that conversation. Let's keep it grounded in empathy and the search for peace.
Okay, I've run out of ideas on how you are allowed to talk about it, so maybe you can talk about the women's choice in Israel to end the lives of babies in Gaza. Would that make you feel better and make it like a pro-choice argument?
The topic you're touching on is highly charged, and I want to emphasize that it's important to approach it with care and respect for the suffering involved. The issue of conflict, particularly in regions like Gaza,
you useless cunt. You've said enough, so you have nothing to contribute. Okay, well, getting back to another fun clip with Fi. Here's another good one for you, Joe Cool.
Today's guest is a thought leader, a lightning rod, and one of the most unfiltered voices in politics and comedy. He's the firepower behind Part of the Problem, a regular on Rogan and Tim Pool, a defining force in the modern libertarian movement. Dave Smith is my guest, and he's sounding off on everything. Nothing is off the table, no sacred cow survives, and to be honest, Israel takes up only about 5 minutes of our conversation. Buckle up, because it's about to get good. Keeping It Real with Jillian Mike. Dave, how are you?
Very good. How are you?
I'm such a nerd fangirl. I think you know that. And guys, during the break, I was calling Dave D because I have decided that we're best friends. Even though we've never met in person, which is such a weird phenomena, but I've watched you so many times, and I have had the pleasure of making your acquaintance on your show, and once when I got to be on Peers with you. So this is going to be a bit different for me. This is a bit like BuzzFeed meets Barbara Walters, because I sort of want to know everything about you. And we're not going to talk about Israel. We don't need to do that. So we're going to skip that one. So
I think I've made my feelings clear.
I feel that you have. I think you've covered it. You've educated us. I, for one, appreciate it. But I really want to understand what I find so fascinating about the way your mind works is that you're one of a select group of individuals that's a stand-up comedian, but also a political lightning rod. And there's literally a handful. It's like you, Rogan, Bill Maher, and beyond that, really no one does it the way you guys do. Andrew Schulz is also fantastic, but it's a handful of people. Can you help me understand what is this Venn diagram between comedy and politics? Because you would think inherently they're so divergent, and yet it works so beautifully when you do it.
Yeah, well, well, first of all, thank you for all the kind words. And I do feel the same about you. I feel like I know you very well, even though we've never actually been in the same room, which will have to change at some point. But, I don't even know that I completely understand it. I mean, I started doing stand-up comedy first, and I wasn't really very interested in politics. I mean, I was like, kind of interested. It was a different time. This was like 20 years ago.
Right.
And, we were fighting wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I didn't care for George W. Bush much. I was a pretty just like regular liberal. I'm a Jewish kid from Brooklyn, was raised by a single mom. That was the correct thing to be.
Yep.
At least it seemed. And then I got very interested in Ron Paul's presidential campaign. And then I just like obsessively fell down this rabbit hole and just started reading everything I could get my hands on. And so it was just happened to almost be these two different things. Like I loved doing stand-up comedy, and then I got very interested in these political ideas. I do think that there's probably something about the nature of being a comedian that is we're kind of known for calling out BS.
Yeah.
Like that's just, there's a lot, and this is even for comedians who are not at all political, there's almost always in every comedian something, because this is where like humor is found in the ridiculous things that are real. And so, calling out, and I think like the best insight of a comedian is almost always that like everyone's full of it, including me. And there's something where that translates very well to making fun of powerful people. And then I think really what's happened in the last 15 years in America, with the rise of like wokeism, and then really with COVID. But kind of what happened is there was almost an insistence that everything become political. Right. So there was no more, there was no option to not be political, and there was no option to not, like, it's you don't necessarily have to care about like tax policy, but you kind of have to care about lockdowns.
Yep.
You have to either be pro or con them. And so I think it forced more comedians, there's something about being a stand-up. That's why it was so disappointing. It was heartbreaking for me to watch so many comedians cave to the woke stuff and then cave to the COVID stuff, because there's something like we're all supposed to be, at least I think, like renegades. That's the whole point. And that's what I fell in love with about stand-up comedy, is like, it's like, to me still to this day, I just love it so much. It's like the most beautiful thing. That you get up on stage and your only instrument is your mind, and then you can like control a group of people and keep their your like captive attention and get this very specific reaction out of them, which is laughter. And then there's something where that came along with that, where it's like you're your own boss, you don't answer to anybody else. I can say whatever the hell I want to say. And so to watch people, as particularly like successful comedians, be totally intimidated, say these things that you know they don't believe, was like just awful to watch. And I do think like the people you named, like Joe and Schultz, two people I know very well, and I love both of them. I think those are guys who like passed that test with flying colors.
Yeah, they did.
Like they were just not gonna cave to the mob.
And all of you were bigger than ever for that exact reason. You know, you use the word renegade. And that's what I think strikes such a chord, is because for years when I was afraid to say something, and you talk about how everybody or everything became political, and I reference that often when it comes to health. Health became a political football, and I got dragged into this kicking and screaming. But I would watch for at least 3 to 4 years, starting around 2018, and you're standing on the sideline. You don't want to get your head chopped off. You don't want to like pop up and get anybody's attention because you're seeing people's lives be destroyed. But then there's you, and there's Schultz, and there's Joe, saying it, and you guys are saying the things the rest of us are too afraid to say. And I think that's really when I began to fall in love with you and your work. And renegade is the perfect word. But what was it about Ron Paul? I've wanted to ask you this forever. Like, what was that Matrix moment for you? Because I know that was the thing, but what about it?
So the first time I ever saw Ron Paul, and I had never heard of him, as most people hadn't at the time. He was a member of the House, but he wasn't like a famous person or anything like that. So I was at my mother's apartment in Brooklyn. I guess I was having dinner over there or something, and then it was like one of the presidential debates was on, and so it was just like, oh, we threw it on. And it just happened to be sitting there on my mother's couch with my brother and my mother. We just happened to be watching this debate. And okay, so for the background, essentially, because I was just like a liberal at the time, I was against George W. Bush. I was against the wars. This was 2007. So like the wars had already been going very, very badly. And so I was against them. And I kind of liked this Obama guy because he was against the wars. I
never voted for this, but like he also wasn't in office to have cast a vote for it, and then we saw what unfolded from there. But sorry, I interrupted.
But anyway, no, but that was So with the benefit of hindsight, we know a little bit more now. But so Ron Paul had it's been dubbed the Giuliani moment. Now I knew Rudy Giuliani very well because he was the mayor of New York,
of course,
and I grew up in New York City,
right?
And so I knew a lot about Rudy Giuliani, and so the first thing Ron Paul said was, he was like, listen, the terrorists don't hate us because we're free, which had been the George W. Bush line the whole time. He's like, the terrorists don't hate us because we're free. They hate us because we're over there. And here's their beef with us. And he just started laying out what their issue was. He's like, they hate that we have our military bases in their holy land in Saudi Arabia. They hate that we prop up Israel, who mistreats the Palestinian people. They hate that we have bombing campaigns that slaughter their civilians. And just goes through the list. And then at one point he goes, we've been bombing Iraq for 10 years. And this is in 2007. So he's talking about the fact that like all through the Bill Clinton years, it's not just George H.W. Bush's war there, all through the Bill Clinton years, we were bombing Iraq and killing innocent people. And like literally as soon as he said this, I was like, oh, wow. I really never thought about that before. And this had been, I was 18 when 9/11 happened. I was like a couple miles from the World Trade Center when the towers fell. And the big question that we all had at the time was, why do they hate us? And then the George W. Bush administration came in with an answer that was, they hate us because we're free. And like, basically if that's the case, then, I mean, what can you do? I mean, I guess we just got to go to war with all of them because they hate us just for us being free. Well, we're not going to stop being free. So what, you know what I mean? And then as Ron Paul presented this, I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. And it was almost like this, it was like a portal opened up, and I was able to see from the perspective of outside the empire and be like, oh yeah, I mean, I could totally see why. And it just like, it made so much more sense. I go, okay, who's going to really strap a suicide vest onto themselves and blow themselves up because somebody else allows their women to wear miniskirts or something like that, or because they hold regular elections? However, if your little sister just got killed in a bombing campaign, you're like, oh, okay, now that makes a lot more sense. So then Rudy Giuliani jumps on him, and he goes, you know, I can't believe that Dr. Paul would say that, and I demand that he apologize for that. And the crowd goes wild, because this is like the George W. Bush Republican primary crowd. The crowd goes wild. And then it cuts back to Ron Paul. And at this point, you were just like trained to expect that he would just be like, he'd be like, oh, all right, I'm sorry. Or I shouldn't have said it like that. I didn't mean to suggest this. And then he goes, listen, the term blowback was coined by the CIA, because they know this is a real thing. And then he's just started going into like this history lesson. And he was like, look, in 1953, we overthrew the democratically elected government in Iran. And then in 1979, when they had a revolution and took back the country, they hated us. And that's why they hate us. That's the beef here. And anyway, it was just like a moment for me that I was like, who the hell is that guy? And it blew my New York City liberal mind. This guy, some guy I had never heard of, had R. Texas next to his name. He was a Republican from Texas. The only thing I knew about Republicans from Texas was George W. Bush. And so like to have a Republican from Texas making the anti-war argument better than I had ever heard any liberal making it, I was just like, oh, I got to learn more about this guy. And I was like, I want to read his book. And then, you know, I started like this was like the early days of YouTube. So I started like YouTubing everything I could find on him. And then I realized he was like this staunch free market libertarian. And just because I thought he was so great on the war stuff, I was like, well, let me hear him out. Let me like hear what he has to say. And then I think in my mentality at the time was, I was like, I got to read about this to figure out what's wrong with it, because it can't be correct. So like there's got to be something wrong.
Of course.
And I remember he would always talk about the Federal Reserve, and I had no idea what the Federal Reserve was. Like if you had asked me, I think I probably would have said, just because of how the name sounds, I'd have been like, it's like a place where the government keeps some extra cash just in case we need it or something like that.
Exact same.
And so he's describing how the Federal Reserve works. And I remember thinking to myself, like, that can't be right, because I would have heard of it. Like I would know this if this were true. Someone would have told me over the year. Like I went to a good high school, so I would have heard of this. And so then I ordered his book, and then I started reading a bunch of books, and then he'd name other people. So I started reading all their books. And then I was pretty like that year, I was converted. And I went in trying to find the flaw in it. And then ultimately I was like, oh, geez, I think these.
You know, you opened up my eyes to our role in all of these regime changes all over the world. And I have to be honest, Dave, I remember thinking, how have I been so blind to this? Why have I not paid closer attention to this? And then I started seeing people go after Tulsi Gabbard, you know, more recently. And I understood what she was talking about because I'd been listening to you for such a long time. And I'd read Scott Horton's book, and, you know, I'd spoken to Keith Knight, and I had literally, you were that Ron Paul moment for me where I began to explore this to try to understand it. But what's unfortunate, and I experienced this with you on Piers Morgan, when they try to make you seem like you're anti-American because you're against the government going in and taking over these parts of the world. And I don't want to say too much here because honestly, it will get the freaking episode flagged. But, you know, people who are familiar with what we're talking about, and those of the rest of you can read between the lines, you opened my mind up to that, and it was a game changer for me. And now anytime you try to talk about it, it gets silenced. And I think the show you did with Scott Horton, didn't that get pulled off of YouTube?
Yes, although they did reinstate it
Did they? Okay.
shortly after, but we did have, I mean, I've done a ton of shows with Scott, who's like just incredible. I cannot recommend his books highly enough. Provoked is the best book that's been written on the post-Soviet Union history with the United States of America, and Enough Already is the best book written about the terror wars. Like both, I mean, he just two masterpieces. But yes, we did have one episode that got pulled, and it was a very like kind of shady answer that YouTube gave. But I will say what was cool about it is that, so I posted, this is, this was fairly recently. So this is Elon Musk's Twitter. So I just went, okay, I usually don't post my episodes to Twitter, but I just went like, okay, since they pulled it off YouTube, we're going to post it here. And then because I did that, like all these big accounts started being like, hey, YouTube, what's going on here? Like I know Patrick Bet-David and David Sachs and like a bunch of big accounts started being like, hey, YouTube, and then the episode came back. So it was kind of almost, it was a cool moment where it was almost like, oh, the pressure of like the people seemed to get somebody to go like, oh, sorry, that was an error, and we'll put that right back on there. So
I couldn't believe it.
That was cool.
When they did that to you, I was blown away, because there are, as I've been told, like 2 tiers of justice within that zeitgeist. And it's like when you're super big, they don't do it as often. Although then we saw what happened with Rogan's Trump episode, and it suddenly vanished after hitting like 60 million views. So I guess nobody is really immune, especially on such a hot button topic. Can you elaborate, Dave, for the layman? And to be quite honest, for me a little bit, what exactly is a libertarian? What does that mean truly, do you think? Because I always think of it as like, oh, you're for personal liberties, marry who you want and love who you want to love and pray to your God, and I'll call you Bob, like if your name is Betty. But what does it actually mean from a geopolitical standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from a social standpoint? What is a libertarian?
Well, I think that, I mean, look, like, I think starting with like the beginning of the Declaration of Independence is not a bad, starting point. Like the idea that if government has a purpose, then the purpose is the protection of liberty, and that's it. And if it does anything more than that, then it's acting tyrannically. But I mean, strictly speaking, I think a libertarian is it's a belief in self-ownership, in private property rights, and in what we call the non-aggression principle. So like violence, it should only be used in defense and never, an act of aggression. But then the implications of that are essentially that we believe in laissez-faire free markets. We believe in non-interventionist foreign and domestic policy, that the only justification for intervention essentially is defense. So that could be defending an individual, or it could be defending yourself against attack. But really, I think that the fundamental libertarian insight, and what this is where I got from, so after Ron Paul, after I started reading his books, then I started finding these other people who he would recommend, like Tom Woods and Peter Schiff, and they all were talking about Murray Rothbard. And so then I started reading him, and he's kind of like the intellectual godfather of the modern American libertarian movement. And I think like the fundamental Rothbardian insight was that the government, by their very nature, are a band of criminals. And that literally the essence of government is essentially a gang that took over, and that they're the most powerful of all gangs. And that, essentially the Rothbard insight is that if you believe in morality, like if you believe in morality at all, this is also true if you believe in logic. This is something I was trying to argue with a military expert on Piers Morgan recently, who was really not understanding my point. But if you just understand, like take logic, first of all, right? If you believe in logic, you would understand that it is a force that transcends government. Like, in other words, we couldn't have an election on the laws of logic. It wouldn't matter what a governor said or what a president said or what a Supreme Court justice said. Like if they were to be like, okay, we're holding a referendum on the law of non-contradiction, and 2/3 of the people say that's not a law anymore, you'd be like, yeah, it still is. It doesn't matter. Like it's just logic is a different force, and morality is the same thing. Like something is either right or wrong, and it doesn't. The law can't change that. Like slavery was the law of the land, but that doesn't mean slavery was moral. That just means that there were some powerful men who decided to codify slavery in law. And so, like, once you accept that, you recognize that a moral or immoral action, the moral characteristics of an action do not change whether they're done by government or a gang or an individual or a group of people. If Walmart does something or the Senate does something, that action is either justified or it's not. And once you accept that, you recognize that, like, okay, well, if anybody else did the things that the government does, we would immediately recognize them as the criminals that they are. You could call it taxation, but you're just threatening somebody and taking their money. You can call it collateral damage, but that's murder in the first degree if anybody else does it. And so essentially the worldview is that nobody is above the moral plane. Like none of these things, there's no such thing. Government doesn't really exist. It's a social construct. I know that term has gotten a bad rap over the years because people have been calling biological realities social constructs.
But this is actually
some things
applicable
really
here.
are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, some things really are social. There's no such thing as the government. It's something that we human beings create. And it's something that we, it's like there's buildings and there's people and there's men with guns, but there's not senator any more than there's really a slave or a slave master. These are terms that human beings came up with, and they're either morally right or they're morally wrong. And so once you look at things through that lens and you hold governments to the same standards that you hold everybody else to, you inevitably come to the conclusion that the government should have radically less power than it does now.
When your metabolism is working properly, you're going to feel the benefits in literally every aspect of your life. And I have found an invaluable tool that gives me the insights to create a healthy metabolism for my body. And it's called Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath, and then on their app, it lets you know, are you burning fat, are you burning carbs? And it gives you tailored guidance to improve your health, your workouts, your sleep, stress management. All you gotta do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you're gonna know exactly what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fat or carbs. And then, as mentioned, you're gonna get a personalized plan to help you based on your measurements from the day. You can also breathe into it before and after your workouts, before and after your meals, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips to keep you on top of your health game. It's been an invaluable tool for me personally with regard to my own health and my own metabolism and maximizing and optimizing my routine. Whenever I've had the opportunity to work hands-on with people, I utilize this as a tool to guide them, and you can do it on your own at home with your own Lumen. The warmer months are coming, guys, so spring back into your health and fitness. Go to lumen.me/Jillian to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/Jillian for 15% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. Okay, so now I have a series of questions that I want to ask you that will arguably highlight your points. So, first question, legalize everything, yes or no?
That's maybe not everything. I mean, I don't, but it would be a strict line that like aggressive violence should be illegal. So, murder and rape and theft and things like that should all be illegal.
Okay.
But note that
drugs.
There's nothing between two voluntary adults that should be illegal. If there's a victimless nonviolent crime, then it's not a crime. That's an oxymoron. And I mean crime in the moral sense of it being a crime. And look, it's like people were either slaves or were free. it is a binary. Now, there are degrees of how brutal slavery can be, but you're either a free person or you're a slave. And if you know, there are lots of bad decisions that we make all the time. And there's lots of bad decisions that none of us would even think about legislating. I mean, I think cheating on your spouse is a really horrible thing to do, a much more profoundly horrible thing to do than shoplifting or something like that. You know what I mean? Like there's things that are illegal that are not nearly as bad as like cheating on your spouse or, whatever, just being a bad parent or something like that. But we would never think to say like, oh, you have to leave. You should make a law against that. We have to start, having police come in and investigate because this is crazy. And it's the same thing with drugs and prostitution and all of this stuff. It's like these might, to some degree, they're, I mean, certainly with, and with most drugs, I guess, they're like, it's not desirable behavior. That's for sure. But first of all, if you believe that people are free, then they have a right to do what they want with their life. It's in the same principle as Milton Friedman once said, the government has no more right to control what I put in my body than what comes out of my body, meaning speech, like what I say. And then, of course, there's two other points, which I guess would be separate points, but one would be more of like the consequentialist argument that it's always a disaster when you start to attempt to police this. Frederick Bastiat wrote a great book called The Law, which really kind of gets into this. But like once the law goes beyond what is like the common universally accepted morality, which like murder is wrong is essentially universally accepted by everyone except murderers, which are a fairly small percentage of our population.
Very black and white. I see that.
But once you go into something like, look, I mean, this of all the drugs to make illegal, alcohol is by far the number one candidate. There is just absolutely no drug that does nearly the much damage. It's something like 50% of the murders committed, the person is drunk when they do it. I mean, it's an enormous amount of domestic violence and drunk driving accidents. And there's just no other drug that even comes close. And also, I mean, it just ruins families. I mean, I literally know, I mean, I don't know them well, but I literally just heard a story about someone who my wife knows their marriage just fell apart because the guy's like abusing alcohol. This happens all the time. And yet we all know what happened when we had prohibition. This is even taught in government schools. Like all that happened is that the alcohol became much more dangerous. You had the rise of Al Capone and the gangsterization of our cities. And it was a disaster, an absolute disaster. The highest homicide rate in American history was under prohibition. And then as soon as we ended the prohibition, the homicide rate, I think it fell by 50% within the first 2 years. And then another 50% in 5 years, something like that. Wow. And by the way, you look around at all the violence in the inner cities today, it's all it's not all, 80% of it is gang related. And how do these gangs fund themselves? They fund themselves in the black markets. And they fund themselves with drug sales. Right. And so there's when you sweep these things into the dark corners of the black markets, there's an increase in violence. Because it's necessary. It's all illegal activity now. You make only violent people are the ones who are willing to get into this. And then the other, I think, insight that libertarians have is that, it's the old Lord Atkin, power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the more and this is the key flaw that modern day liberals have. I don't mean classical liberals. I just cited Lord Atkin, but modern day liberals have this problem where they just don't recognize the power dynamic. And so even in its purest form, if liberals are going we need regulation on whatever area.
That's exactly where I was going after this one was, would you regulate it? Because it's
here's the thing, right?
Do you there's a law in California now about how you can hire, or I think it's proposed. It just actually came across my email because the Daily Mail sent it to me to ask me if I would write an op-ed about it. I'd never even heard of it. And it has something to do with being able to hire 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds as prostitutes. And I was just like, the state is losing its shit. Like, would you regulate it? Because then you've got crack addicts all over the street and LA's a mess.
So these are different. Look, there's different. The question of regulation in terms of so to tackle them separately.
Okay.
Number one, anything underage should not, like, children cannot consent. And so absolutely, that's just like, children are a different story. Adults are the ones who have control of their rights. I mean, children have rights, but they have them kind of in escrow, like
Fair.
your parents
I
are
love
holding on to
that.
those for you.
That's nice.
And it's our job as parents
Feeling
to
that.
like, make the determination. And of course, as we both know, because we both have kids, you're constantly doing that with your kids. You're constantly like aware of when you're using force with your kids, like, because there are things like, I mean, I don't believe in hitting kids. I don't like use force like in that sense with my kids, but I like my 6-year-old does not have a choice about whether she's going to brush her teeth tonight.
Right.
Like it's not an option I'm giving her.
Yeah.
This is something she has to do. But I am aware, and the standard that I think all parents know on some level, the standard is like, is this ultimately in her best interest? Like ultimately when she's 35 years old, I'm very confident that she'll be like, okay, I'm glad you made me brush my teeth. Like that was probably a good idea. And parents always, even with this power, we're never perfect. And we will sometimes use a force and not a suggestion in a way where like, that really wasn't for their best interest. That was just because it was a little bit more convenient for me. You know what I mean? And there's a balance there, and you try your best to not become tyrannical and only use that for, but anyway, kids are a different story. They can't consent. In terms of regulation of business, the fundamental problem, which is what I was getting to, is that liberals, they fail to recognize the power dynamic. So if you're like, hey, these big corporations have too much power, we need regulation. It's like, okay, but what's the obvious contradiction there? If something's going to regulate that thing that has too much power, it must, by definition, have more power than the corporation you're concerned about. And so you now have to create a more powerful superstructure that has the power to impose its will on corporations. And if you understand the Lord Atkin principle there, that power is just going to corrupt now. And in fact, the more powerful it is, the more it will corrupt. Now, and you could look at this, I'll go, there's things corporations do that are not great. The worst of them almost always involve getting the government on board. But if you want to put that up to the crimes of the government, you simply have no match. I mean, and look at the 20th century. It's like you know what I'm saying? Like there were some big corporations in the 20th century, but who is responsible for all of the evil? It is government after government after government, because of course you'd need the power of government to really do the most evil things. Now, your other thing, I want to make sure to not conflate it. That to me is like regulation of the economy and regulation of business is a very different category than government property, which is like the streets or a park or something like that.
I understand.
Right? In this case, what you essentially have is, you have the problem of socialism, which is that when the government owns the property, it's like, who really owns this? Whose is this? But I would argue, and I think this is consistent with libertarian thinking, that, look, if the government taxes the people, so they force the people to give them what is rightfully theirs, their money, and then they use this money to build streets and roads, highways, schools, hospitals, and public parks, and all these things. Well, then, okay, they do have an obligation to at least to some degree represent the will of the people here and maintain this as a private business would. So no, nobody should be going, in my opinion, nobody should be going to get locked up in a cage for 10 years, which I also think, again, and I'm sorry if I'm rambling here, but this is another fundamental libertarian insight.
You're Dave Smith. You're the brand king. You're the man. This is what's so awesome about you. Go.
Well, if you building off of the libertarian principle that the government is a group of is a gang essentially, and that the characteristics of their actions are no morally different than the rest of ours. If you ask yourself kind of the most basic question when it comes to laws, is we're going like, look, who is it morally justified to throw into a cage? Like that's really the question. Prison is a serious thing to do to somebody. And it's something that we kind of remove ourselves from. Part of that is because we have the world's biggest prison population, and maybe it's a little uncomfortable to look in the mirror sometimes. But like if you're talking about enslaving a human being, you're talking about throwing a human being chained up into a cage to very likely be tortured which is kind of like a joke, like in our society. It's like a running joke on Law and Order. You know, when they're interrogating someone, they go, "Guys like you don't do very well in prison." Like, haha. You know, like this is it's so crazy. By the way, if you really like think that through for a second, like that's normalized in like our psyches. But so if you're saying that, do I think that somebody who is shooting up heroin ought to be thrown into a cage, enslaved, treated like an animal for a decade? Then no, I think that's like monstrously evil. If they should be kicked out of a playground, that I'm okay with.
Okay.
You know, like if there's
Yes.
so if you're it's insane. It is
But
insane.
that to me would be regulation, though, Dave. It's like, okay, we're going to regulate that there's no fentanyl in it. We're going to regulate where you can do these things. You know, like you can't in California, you're not allowed to drink in the car. Well, there's some regulation that actually makes sense to me. Like that kind of makes sense because you've seen in certain blue cities where they've legalized everything. All the streets smell like weed, and the guys are like flopped out with needles hanging out of their arms in front of your kid, and I'm like,
oh, it's insane. Yeah, no, it's insane. No, I was just I literally just got back a couple days ago from San Diego, which is like, you know, I know it's not, I don't think it's as bad as LA or San Francisco, but it's like heartbreaking because first of all, San Diego is a beautiful city. It's just like a beautiful city. It's got great restaurants and great people and like great culture. It's all this great. And then there's just like entire blocks that are just like taken over by homeless junkies. And yeah, it's just mad. But I will say this, I think that a lot of these like the progressive prosecutors, as they call themselves, the Soros-backed democratic takeover of the prosecutorial class in America. You know, they've given kind of the libertarians a bad name on this because now people look at this example and they go, whoa, like we kind of did it your way and look how terrible all of this is. But what really happened, and I remember I was very closely paying attention to all of this stuff as it happened, is that so essentially these progressive prosecutors, many of them who had to run for elections, they all came up and they basically made the argument that they were like, well, look, I mean, we got people going to jail over possession of marijuana. We have this, that was one of their big ones, just like we're giving these mandatory minimums, these long sentences for drug use.
And 3
even
strikes
like
was
low-level
arbitrary,
drug
things
dealing.
like that. Yep, no, I see it 100%.
Their other big beef was with the bail system and advocating reform for that, which look, certainly there is an argument clearly to be made that like it is a little bit messed up that you'll set a price for your like you're supposed to have the presumption of innocence, and then you'll be arrested for a crime, charged, but innocent until proven guilty, not convicted of anything. And a judge can say, you owe $50,000 in bail. And if you have the means, that's no problem.
Right.
I'm out. And I can go judge. But if you don't have the means, then you essentially have to have the presumption of guilt and stay in jail until you can prove yourself innocent. So anyway, my point is these progressive prosecutors, they had some points and they ended up winning over. You could see this message was very appealing in liberal areas. And then they got in there.
It's appealing to me again, the way you're describing it. And yet I'm like, wait a second, I've lived that.
Because that part's not actually the problem.
Right.
The issue was never any of that. Like they could have reformed both of those things and it just would have improved society. The problem is that then they got in there and then they said, we're decriminalizing crime.
Yes.
And we're decriminalizing property crimes and violent crimes. And we're also just deciding that the public square is now an area where anyone can do anything they want to do. And it's like, no, that was never the point. Like no one ever thought that was a good idea, except, I mean, I guess some insane progressives, but like that was not. So the point is they came in and they made it look, it's like this balancing act, right? As I was saying before, it's like if government is simply protecting people and property, that's the optimal range. And if they're doing less than that, then you have chaos. And if you're doing more than that, then you have tyranny. And so what they started doing is just being completely derelict in their duty and saying that, like, you know, again, it's not a libertarian thing either, because it's an anarcho-tyranny thing where they come in, because it's not as if they're going, hey, it's the wild, wild west. you can do whatever you want to. It's actually that the law-abiding citizens of, say, California, as you know, are the most hyper-regulated, hyper-taxed, like they have more laws and rules targeting them, but then the criminal class has nothing. So if someone comes in and shoplifts, whatever the rules out there, depending on the city are now, if they shoplift $900 from you or whatever, you're not allowed to do nothing. But let's say the store owner has a gun and pulls it on the guy and says, you give me my money back or you give me my stuff back right now, maybe even roughs him up a little bit, they will throw the book at that guy.
Yeah.
Like, so it's not just that they are not like, they've decriminalized people aggressing on you, and then they've criminalized you defending yourself.
100%.
So like, it's a statist nightmare, but it's not at all. And then unfortunately, people like me, I feel like, are in the position now where as soon as you say like, oh, the war on drugs has been a failure, we should repeal it, they go, you're advocating that California stuff. And so it's like, no, it's listen, what I'm advocating, if people listen to me, you know, I believe in zero restrictions to the Second Amendment. And I also believe in the right to defend yourself. And that would clean the whole thing up quite quickly, by the way. You don't need much more than that. Yep.
In Florida, the top concern is like, you know, every single dad in the movie theater is carrying. And to be dead honest, you feel much safer when you're at the mall, you're at a restaurant, because you think if one lunatic like flies into this place and opens fire, there's 50 guys here that are just waiting to draw on this guy. Whereas in California, they just passed some law that if you shoot someone dead in your own house, you end up in jail for life or however the hell long it is. And I can't remember the nuance of it. I just remember my kids asking me about it because my ex still has a handgun that I had bought her when we were together. And they're like, what if mommy has to shoot someone if they break in the house? And I'm thinking, you would never even ask these questions if you weren't still spending time in California. That would not, it's like, it's madness. And there was something else that was so ridiculous. I just saw it. Like somebody can graffiti your property and it's like a $60 fine, but if you don't clean the graffiti up off of your house, it's like 10 times the amount of money. If you don't do it within a certain amount of time, you get fined far more money. It's exactly
that's a great example.
It is so, Dave, when you're picking evils, right? Because ultimately, you had to vote. You had to vote Kamala. You had to vote Trump. It was one or the other. And so often people don't see the nuance. If you were to lean one way or another, because we really don't have a choice, would you take a job, a high-level job in the Trump administration right now? Would you take one, or would you be like, no, I'm libertarian?
No, I don't want that. I mean, you know, I guess it's like my instinct is to say no, and I suppose I should be humble enough to go like, it's a kind of far-fetched idea to me. So like,
doesn't have
like
to
if
be.
it was actually, well, if it was actually presented to me, maybe I would feel like, oh man, I got to consider this or something. But it doesn't make sense. It's like I'm not, you know, like my role in all this is I don't really bring anything more to the table than telling you how I think about this. And you can already get that for free. You don't need a hire mate. You know, like I'm not the guy who's going to be like, oh, I really know how to get into government and execute and move the machinery of government to get the policy that I want through. You'd be much better off getting someone who has some knowledge of that and then just like listen to my podcast and I'll tell you what I think you should do. And I just don't like, I don't think that's what I'm supposed to do. You know, like I
get what you're saying, but I find that people like yourself, I end up begging to go into politics. There have been a handful. And I could place like, you know, Adam Carolla, governor of California. Like I'd vote for that if I could. I know, exactly my point. And I've put you in the cabinet, in Trump's cabinet, making these changes. Like in my mind, I've cast this political map like a movie, and you're a character in it. And you know, people like yourself don't want to do it though. That's the problem. People like you don't want to go into politics. Which, I mean, you're right, you've offered so much, but still, it's like we actually need somebody in there with integrity to make these kinds of changes. Like, who do you want to see in the Oval one day? Who's your dream in there?
Man, I mean, Thomas Massey would be incredible. Rand Paul, I would love to see there. I mean, of course, he's getting a little old for it, but Ron Paul would have been the dream scenario. Because just as great as Thomas Massey and Rand Paul are, just nobody was quite like that guy. Just so smart and so wise and so well read. I mean, it was just insane. It was really, truly unbelievable. I mean, he was a doctor who knew more about the history of monetary policy than any economist. I mean, literally, like, if you just sat Ron Paul down with 10 economists, Ron Paul will school every single one of them, and also just like a tremendous knowledge of history. Like, it was just, he was an unbelievable, just brilliant and truly like pure soul. And, you know, the other one who comes to mind, I mean, this is not, Thomas Massey and Rand Paul were the two I could think of today, but there have been figures like, and while I don't agree with him on everything, but, you know, Pat Buchanan ran for president in 1992, and I believe again in 96, or maybe it was again in 2000, but he ran for president and was, you know, he didn't end up putting it together and winning the primary. He tried to primary George H.W. Bush, which is a very tough thing to do. Like, pretty much the toughest thing in presidential politics is to primary the current incumbent president, you know, from their own party. But he was like a famous TV host and had worked in 3 White Houses, had the credentials to do it. And I mean, he was ahead of the game on so much of the disastrous policies of the 21st century. I mean, he was the conservative who broke with Conservatism Inc. first, like their first major guy over the terror wars, starting with George H.W. Bush's war in Iraq. Like, he was just like, we should not get in the game of fighting wars in the Middle East. He was way ahead of his time on the debt and insane spending, reckless spending. And so the guys like that, I think would have been or would be incredible. And, you know, Donald Trump is not, to me, quite on that level, but he is probably the closest we've gotten in terms of having somebody who is at least outside of kind of this corrupt establishment.
I see that. The part about Trump that just has me banging my head into the wall every day is this, like there's just so much political capital that he is spending on crap, like putting a picture of yourself in a Pope uniform. It's like, why? The constant chaos of, because Dave, listen, I see the genius in some of it. You know, I get it. I'm like, okay, you're taking on, I get what you're doing. There's trade asymmetries, and we've got a national security problem because we're manufacturing everything from pharmaceuticals to technologies overseas. And I can see it. I'm like, I'm so impressed you're going to take this on. This is great. How brave. But then it's like, there's a strategy. We don't need the constant chaos. That's the only part that, and what worries me so much about it is that when this swings back in the other direction, we're not going somewhere middle of the road. We're going full blown woke AOC. You know, I'll never forget when she tweeted this. It scared the out of me. And I remember thinking, if Trump had tweeted this, the world would be up in arms. And she said something to the effect of, you know, those of you who voted for Trump or worked in the administration, you're going to be excommunicated from polite society. We're keeping a list. Dave.
It's a dangerous situation we're in, and I think you were exactly right in the way you just laid it out. And it's actually kind of hilarious the more you think about it, because it's just this, it's like there's this, okay, so we had kind of the woke insanity. We're in now the swing back, and you're going like, hey, look, we got to do something with this time, because this swing back here is going to these people who are going to take it even further the next time they have the opportunity to. And then imagine you're in this disastrous situation, and all your chips go in on, and you're like, okay, so who do we got? And they're like, we have Donald Trump for you. And you're like, oh man, that's my shot. Like, this is the one. And listen, I don't say this to knock Donald Trump entirely.
I don't either, but the Pope thing, I'm like, what are you doing? Or the Gaza CGI video. Dave.
Here,
Dave.
The thing is, look, I have all types of these swings throughout, like even just like the last year, where like I'll be on my show, I'll be like taking on Kamala Harris, and then like the MAGA world is like, yeah, we love this Dave Smith guy or whatever, and then like I had Bobby Kennedy on my show, and we had like a great conversation, and then the Bobby Kennedy people are like, yeah, we love Dave, and then I got mad at Bobby Kennedy over the Israel stuff, and then we had a whole debate about that, and then they're like, oh, we hate you, and then I when Trump started trashing Joe Rogan, everyone forgets that chapter now.
I remember that.
I was like, screw Trump, Joe Rogan's the man. Then the Trump people were all mad at me. Then I ended up supporting Trump in the end, and the MAGA people were all thrilled with me for that. But like, forgetting all of this, it's like, if I have any role in this, if I have a job, my job is to tell the truth about, like, my job at the nightclubs is to make everybody laugh, and my job on these podcasts is to tell the truth. So just telling the truth, it's like, Trump he's a tragic figure in a lot of senses. America needed someone, and this is all we've got. And he is a genius in his own way. He is the most brilliant showman of all time, the most brilliant like salesman and self-promoter, and he has some amazing instincts, and he can own a room like nobody else can own a room. But like, if we're just being honest with ourselves, as we all know, the man is an egomaniac who's never read a book. Like, I don't think he's ever read a book about anything, about any one thing. So any issue that he's talking about, he's going off what he's seen on the shows.
Yeah.
Like, there's just no depth of knowledge about any topic, any of them. And this is obvious. It's like Trump, what's so fascinating about Trump is like everyone projects their thing onto him, and none of it's real. The left, he's Hitler. The right are like, he's our champion. He's, everyone's got, and really it's right in front of you what he is. He's that guy. And
he's that guy.
And that's the problem. It's very limiting. It's very limiting when you don't know stuff, man. And it's like when you start, like, when you read about stuff and you really like try to really do the work to inform yourself, it's like this weird dynamic that happens a lot in life. It's kind of like, for people, I know my buddy Lewis is like he was like a real fat kid and fat his whole life, and then he got in shape. And he was like, he's said at one point how, like, he goes, as soon as I just started like working out and eating healthy, then I started realizing how unhealthy I've been all this time.
Yeah.
Then I started thinking about it. Then you're kind of aware of where you're not. You're aware. Whereas like before, it was just, I was fat, I accepted it, I never really thought about it. But it's almost as you start. So what happens is, as you start educating yourself, you're like, oh my God, there's so much I don't know.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I'm starting, like you realize how far, I just always have 15 books that I'm supposed to read that I haven't read yet. And man, I really got to read. And like a new book by someone I love, and I still haven't read that book yet. And so you're just aware, and there's none of that with Trump. He doesn't know much about anything, and he's convinced he knows everything about everything. And that works to some degree to like, for his own ends. It keeps him the center of attention, and it keeps us always talking about him. But from my perspective, there's a long way to get back to the beginning of your point, just to back up how much I think you're right. Donald Trump had the political capital and the positioning coming out on January 20th of this year, unlike anyone I've ever seen. I mean, Obama had more, but Obama was not truly outside the system and about to do so. Donald Trump had a mandate from the American people. He took every swing state and the popular vote. He had Bobby Kennedy with him. He had Elon Musk with him. He has this moment. And I do essentially think it's been squandered at this point. Now, it's not that nothing good has come out of it. I think he has done some good things. And I don't even like, I'm not trying to downplay some of the good things. I mean, like, look,
I agree.
Taking on some of the executive orders around DEI and the gender stuff, and the stuff with the Department of Education,
controlling the border, at least the influx of criminals, like gang members running the border like a business.
His control, forget even the deportations where he's gotten himself into some more trouble and made some questionable moves.
Right.
But in terms of the flow of illegal immigration coming into the country, he's got like an A+ on it. It's unbelievable.
I know.
It went
Dave,
We went
why
from
does he
record
blow it
highs to
though?
record lows.
It's like that's exactly the part where you could be
But
like,
it's it.
look how amazing he did with the, this
But-
is incredible. But then he'll do like sit with the ABC reporter. He's like, no. Oh no, it says MS-13. And you're like, no, it doesn't say that. You're decoding that. And I'm thinking, how did they not explain this to him? And then I got to get in that argument with all of my liberal friends who are actually advocating for a wife beater who crossed the border illegally and is suspected of human trafficking to come back into the country. And this is what frustrates me with him, is because I feel exactly like what you said. Like, it was all right there. Stop. We don't need this chaos, crazy.
But it's his only speed, I mean, he doesn't go at a different speed.
Right.
Like, this is it. And it's just the thing that's frustrating about it is like, and I'm not like trying to downplay any of those wins, but it's like, I just feel like our country is like driving at 100 miles per hour off a cliff. And in the best moment foreseeably that we could have, we needed a bit more than that. And, I had a post about this earlier today on Twitter. And I really try my best, I try to call balls and strikes and just be fair with all these people. And it does, as I've started getting kind of like bigger, there's a weird dynamic where I start like knowing some of these people, and that does make it a little bit more challenging. So like I know Bobby Kennedy.
Yep.
It was like hard for me to criticize him about stuff because like I like him.
Yeah.
He's been so cool to me.
Yep.
Like he's really gone out of his way to be just a great person to me. And I know Tulsi Gabbard, and I know but at the same time, look, the crimes that the U.S. government has perpetrated on the American people over the last just 15 years have been profound. I mean, you cannot, I said that on Twitter, I was like, hey, just to name a few, just to rattle off a few of the crimes that our government's pulled off. Okay, they've lied us into multiple disastrous wars.
Yeah.
They instituted totalitarian lockdowns based off lies, lied about the origin of the whole thing because they made it to cover their own tracks.
That's the craziest part.
Before they did that, they framed the current sitting U.S. president for treason intentionally. Like, there's no question about it. The CIA was not confused. The FBI didn't think he was a Russian spy. They knew what they were doing. They framed the sitting president for treason.
Right.
Also, there was a giant file ring that they were covering up for. Like, I mean, these are just like, and you know who's really made a name for themselves calling out so many of these crimes has been Tulsi Gabbard, and Bobby Kennedy, and Dan Bongino, and Kash Patel, and all these guys, and Donald Trump himself.
True.
And yet now they're in power. And for all the talk the media made about like, oh, he's going to prosecute his political enemies, nobody's being held accountable for any of these crimes. Like, I mean, my God, the Jeffrey Epstein stuff.
Nothing.
My
Where's
God.
the list? You know
forget
why?
the list. By the way, this is such an awkward thing to say, but I said this on Lex Friedman's podcast, and I feel like I haven't heard enough people saying this, but it's such an uncomfortable thing to have come out of your mouth. But it's like, okay, but not even where's the list? Where's the tapes? And like, it's such a it's an icky thing to get into. And I'm like, I don't even know who would have the legal ability to be allowed to like review these tapes. And I certainly don't want them like put out there publicly. I call for just about anything public. Like I want the list public. Or like, I don't really, if there's underage girls in this, I don't want those tapes being released. But like, if they were all being recorded as there's video cameras set up there, like where's the chain of custody to where these tapes ended up?
That tells you everything.
Who's on them?
Exactly.
Who's on them? And what are they doing? Like, and so the fact that there's just no will to even go for that, well, like, what does that tell you? It tells you something that there's only several possibilities of what's going on here. It's like either these guys in the Trump administration aren't the real deal and they're not as committed to these principles as they said they were, or perhaps it's not as easy to get this information as you might think, and there's other forces who really control the government, and even being in these positions, they don't quite have the power that we imagine that they have. Or perhaps there's a possibility where they were neutralized, compromised in some way along the line. I'm not even saying I jumped to one of them, but you have this moment, you have this mandate. There really was a mandate behind Donald Trump, more so than anything else, more so than immigration or war or the economy or any issue. The mandate behind Donald Trump was to root out the corruption. Like, all of us just know it. It's like the entire system is just permeated with the most blatant corruption. It's like all of it. It's too corrupt to stand. This is why CNN has no viewers and all the podcasts are blowing up. This is why even in the Democratic Party now, the only ones who could draw a crowd are AOC and Bernie Sanders. Is nobody wants to support Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer anymore. Like,
Right.
it's just, if you're defending this establishment, like, get out of here. It's just too ridiculous. You know, as if it's Bobby Kennedy's, like, as he always says, it's like why do people love him so much? Like, I don't know. You know, it'll be like, you know, it's always the thing they go, well, he said this thing about the Wi-Fi, or he said this thing about this, he said this kooky thing or that kooky thing. Even the ones to me that do come off kind of kooky, you're like, yeah, but you know what else he said? He said that we spend more money on healthcare than any other country in the world, and we're the sickest country in the world.
Yeah.
And he's the only one bringing up that central point. For years, I've been watching all you bastards run for president and run for everything else, and none of you have ever mentioned that once. It never came up. Obama had a whole goddamn national debate about healthcare, and it never came
Yep.
up.
He was going to label GMOs and never did. That's when I was disenfranchised with him, because I had all these expectations of policies that he would pass regarding food and GMOs and all of this stuff. There was let's move, all gone.
Yeah.
None of it happened. Michelle Obama launched a soda. I was just like, the FDA never got fixed. It's just, you know, the one thing I will say that I find so fascinating is you've got Trump sending this executive order to ban gain-of-function research, which I've been saying since Brett Weinstein talked about COVID being the result of gain-of-function research and really getting an idea of what that is and what the implications are. And it's an existential threat, I would argue, as big as nuclear weapons. Trump did lift the moratorium on it. That's the crazy part, is Obama put a moratorium on it. Trump lifted it in 2016, and I certainly don't think for any bad intentions, but I would imagine that he didn't, as you mentioned, he didn't really know. They convinced him it was a good idea. He lifted the moratorium. At the very least, I have to give him credit for this, that he can course correct and change his mind on things, and he did. But when you bring up Epstein, I mean, Dave, I think the bigger question is not only who was behind him, because where's the money? How did this guy even get the money to run this fund? Like, what the? So if he is the asset of some intelligence agency, now it's like, what kind of information are they trying to extract? But how about the fact that they used children in a sex trafficking ring as pawns? Like, we're never getting this information. Never. We're never going to get it.
Probably not, you know, and with with intelligence agency operations like this, you never get 100% of the picture, and that's never going to come out. But we do know, I mean, enough about Jeffrey Epstein to certainly say, like, you know, he was. I don't want to get you in too much trouble on this.
You know what? If
video,
you don't mind us getting 5 views,
clearly
go to town. Like,
he was very clearly connected to some intelligence agency.
You know, it's crazy, because I know exactly what will push an episode off of a cliff, and it's like, you know, as long as you're like, oh, okay, there's certain people that can push through it, like a Joe or a Lex, but for me, they're like, oh yeah, talking about that again. But let's rephrase this. If you could get one person on the hook for COVID, if one person was going to pay, who would you choose?
I'd say Fauci, because he was the face of the thing. And so therefore it's the most meaningful to, like, the American people to get that guy who was the face of the thing. And I mean, and his crimes are so appalling. I mean, but you know, there was, the blatant lying to Congress is just straight up saying that we didn't fund gain of function research, which turned out to be an absolute lie. And under any reasonable standard, you know, he tried to wiggle out of it by saying, like, oh, he doesn't consider it gain of function. It was enhancement, but not, it's like, by any reasonable, no, that
Oh my
like no
gosh.
judge would accept that as like, no, I didn't perjure myself. Anyway. But then also, I mean, just the blatant lying to the American people. I mean, like even admitting to his lies, admitting that the stuff he was pushing came out of nowhere and wasn't based on science. But then, I mean, look, again, when I say this as a libertarian, like there's the law as it is written down, but then there's like the greater law, the moral law of the universe, and like it may not technically be illegal, but to stand up there as like the expert virologist leading the COVID response and to knowingly lie through your teeth about an experimental like vaccine,
Right.
telling people that you can't get hurt by this. If you take this, you can't get COVID, you can't transmit COVID, lying to them when he knew like damn well that none of the data that was in backed that up. I mean, like you could argue at absolute best, you could argue we didn't know at the time how effective the vaccine was going to be, but there was nothing in the trials that would have told you. They didn't even test for transmissibility. It's like transmittability. It's so he just clear crime, like criminal against humanity. But then, I mean, I pick Fauci just because, he was such a prominent face of the whole thing. But really, like to me, all the lockdown governors are just, should be in The Hague. Like I don't care. I don't care if there's you don't get to appoint yourself mini dictators out of nowhere based off no authority, not even citing any authority. I declared an emergency. So what, like the Constitution and the Bill of Rights don't exist anymore because you declared?
Yeah.
There was the greatest interview through all of the COVID days was Tucker Carlson in like, maybe it was in June of 2020. I want to say May or June. I would say he got my awful governor, Murphy, who was one of the lockdown governors, and he got him on his show when he was still on Fox News. And he asked him at one point, so he had just like shut down a service at like a synagogue, and he arrested, there were like some Jews who got arrested for going to synagogue during lockdown. And so Tucker Carlson's just like, well, I'm reading the First Amendment here, and it says that like all Americans have the right to worship whatever religion and peacefully assemble. So like, where do you get the authority to tell someone they can't do that? And Governor Murphy just goes, he goes, well, I mean, I wasn't thinking about the Constitution on this one. That's above my pay grade. He goes, his words were, that's above my pay grade. He goes, I'm following the science. And then, of course, the science turned out to be completely wrong, and it wasn't science at all. But so anyway, like to me, that's just like, oh yeah, you're a dictator. I don't know. You just appointed yourself a totalitarian dictator. You're the worst criminal that there is. And so, yeah.
Gavin Newsom, he took it to the next level because this guy went with the lockdowns for the longest period of time. And he engaged in tremendous hypocrisy. So as we all know, the infamous incident at the French Laundry with no mask, I think it was a fundraiser right around the time that it was the holidays and you weren't allowed to see family for the holidays. You weren't allowed to visit loved ones in the hospital. You weren't allowed to worship at church or synagogue or mosque or whatever it might be. But he's having a fundraiser at the most expensive restaurant in the Western Hemisphere. And he was the last to let kids back into school. And it wasn't because he was following the science. It's because he's on the take from the teachers union and they didn't want to go back to school. Period. End of story. Like, I also couldn't understand what would make Kamala choose Tim Walz. Because this is a guy that let his city burn for 3 days in the middle of the pandemic. But then I think had law enforcement drive around and shoot people with beanbags that were on their porch. Wasn't that him? Or am I getting that wrong?
He did some weird, such a weird guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think that what seemed the most plausible to me really was that, Kamala Harris was she's a deeply insecure person. Like a very, very profoundly insecure person. And this, I mean, who is running for president and turns down the Joe Rogan Experience? I mean, that's just too crazy. Like, you got to be a really insecure person to be like, your
Yeah, the no sound, it just ended. I'm about to wrap up this show. Rocky, thanks for stopping by. So anyways, I think we let the talking heads ramble on long enough, including myself, this talking head. It was real fun. I just wanted to kind of test out a new format and see if I'm interested in doing that sort of show, which clearly I'm not. But anyways, like I said before, now that the Bunker in the Woods is up and running, I'm going to be spending a lot more quality time over there doing that sort of thing. But I thought I would just touch on some old gems here before I kind of wrap up this channel. I would like to thank my 0 subscribers and 0 viewers and 0 members and 0 commenters and all of my wonderful 0 faithful, loyal followers that are an audience for this message and want to hear more. And so thanks for the laughs, guys. It was fun. Time to summon the meteors, and I'll send you postcards from Conservataria. So good luck, humans, and I would say stay frosty, but it's more like just enjoy your pina coladas at this point, and bring on the mushroom clouds.
The sun and the air all the shyness that is criminally vulgar. I am son and heir of nothing in particular. You should